Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant, independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. Wednesday, March 26, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. Definitely some important things that I wanted to cover around the spending aspect that I don't think people are giving enough attention to. Definitely the hypocrisy that I think is very important, and not for like a team sport politic kind of dynamic, but just understanding how often our government uses, like we always talk about, things that we want to go after to drive us somewhere new. And so what I think is really interesting is a lot of people are so hyper-focused on the back and forth and really highlighting things that should be removed, but not paying attention to the fact that in a lot of cases, they're still doing essentially the same things. I went after yesterday, day before yesterday, the really interesting circumcision point they keep discussing for Mozambique. And to my surprise, in fact, I really didn't think I was going to find as specifically. I went first for that exact point and found exactly the same thing in the context of HIV. Found many of them. I'll show you that briefly today. But I wanted to go over some more that I found coming off of a new video where they're referencing something about transgender funding of agriculture, whatever, stuff that's outrageously stupid that we should be in the context of, especially with where the country is, that any funding should be going anywhere else, especially for things like that. But to show you that there's still funding coming through in the same way, I almost don't even know how to place that in my mind. And secondarily, how it's not that becoming such it should be a gigantic story, especially because of how just hypocritical it is. Like, we all like to see the contradictions of what especially people in power are claiming. And yet we keep finding these very, very clear contradictions, and it just doesn't seem to go anywhere. So I wanted to reiterate some of those spending right out of the gate again. I want to make sure I point out one positive thing that I saw around the NIH but overlapping that with the concerning direction that I really do think the whole of the U.S. government is driving in, but in particular through the health vein. The artificial intelligence, it's the Great Reset direction. It's the same dynamic. And concerningly, seeing it coming through RFK Jr., Health and Human Services, however you place all of that, it is still happening. And of course, with the new CDC edition, right? What was her name again? Susan Monarez. And the interesting pushback around that, when the conversation started, it wasn't that we were going to get a little bit less bad, right? It wasn't the entire administration was going to be the lesser of evils. It was get past this election dynamic, and then this is going to change everything, and it's going to be all the better. But it's been the lesser of evils in entirety. It's not the no mRNA shots. It's the better direction for the mRNA shots or anything like that. And I tend to think most people see it. I don't know how they couldn't see it, unless more people are dishonest than not. And I just can't believe that. That's not how I can't do this if that's what I believe the world is like. But we're going to talk about the overlap of that with the digital ID point, and how, as we were concerned about, and as now seems to coming to pass, I'm going to hold off on it and really diving into it until we see more continue. But Donald Trump has reiterated the point of the voter ID aspect, which I'll say again, like I did the last time, I agree with the vast majority of what he's laying out around this. I don't think that's really what it's about. I think this is a problem that's been created to justify the step that's going to be made. But the point I'm going to highlight again is what Catherine Austin Fitts saw in it as well, the real ID overlap, which is the digital ID direction. It's a step in that direction, using something that I don't even know why anybody would disagree with. The idea that we should make sure that people are U.S. citizens who are voting. It seems like a wildly benign thing, and yet it gets this amazing conversation, like in the sense that it's just like, it's absurd. And I think there's a reason for that, to hide something like this. That's my personal opinion, but we'll go through that again and show you the developments in that direction and how that then overlaps with the artificial intelligence government direction. Now, I didn't need to include this today because we've basically covered this already, but I wanted to show you a couple additional points, but to show you how, it's just right on the surface. They're not even hiding this. And it's something that in some circles that people don't even admit is happening, which is artificial intelligence in the function of government. And I'm worried about the overarching idea that maybe they're testing some actual just like artificial government in the sense of like top down in control. That's for you to decide. But they are rolling out artificial intelligence programs that are automating things that should be done through humans and things that overlap with wild privacy concerns. And that's just the surface level. When you get into the concerns about, I don't know, foreign countries' involvement or using your privacy data to train AI models for other things, including foreign policy and murder overseas, it becomes a little bit more chilling. But I want to show you some points of, obviously that develops with, connects with the points we were just highlighting, and you'll see how all that comes together. I also want to get into a conversation about, it's kind of the overlap of the two, but rather Israel, the United States foreign policy, how that overlaps with that conversation. But the interesting signal chat thing that I'm not really going to get into too much because I quite frankly think it's mostly manipulation, but I will point some things out, but how that relates to Yemen. And from there, the overlap of what is going on in Israel. But we're going to end today with the point about it's more alarming than, I almost have to say, quite frankly, that it's the specific part about the Venezuelan gang overlap into Trump openly saying that Americans might be sent there as well. It has to be one of the most alarming things in the context of the rapid, as I framed the title today, the rapid decline of American liberty that I've ever seen. Not to say that I haven't seen more extreme action, let's say, but the way that this is going from the Oval Office, openly discussing Americans being sent overseas for things that we have laws for, charge them with a crime. Why would they be sent to an El Salvadorian concentration camp, which is quite literally what it is? It meets the exact definition. It's insane. And I don't know why it's not getting more pushback. But there has been a surge in what I think are, textbook unconstitutional deportations. And we'll go over that again today. And it's rapidly increasing. But I want to start with a couple of points for you guys to see some censorship stuff that I thought was interesting. More kind of confirming for some that may not have seen that this goes all the way back to like the Give, Send, Go discussion, which, there's still people that occasionally donate there. But let's not forget, we did that program, and I've never gotten a straight answer from them or any. It appears to be, look, put it this way. I've never been able to confirm that it was them that have not been allowing recurring donations. They were very kind. They went back and forth with me. They said that's not, they said the banks. So this, what I'm about to show you here, does seem to suggest that it's all banks, which is wild to me. But my point is, we did the Give, Send, Go, and I'll include it for you in case you wanted to donate there. I do still get one-time donations. If you want to try to do a recurring donation, see if it works. But we set this up in regard to, right as all the lawsuits were kind of funneling down. And what we did get through this at the time, it was about over the process of a couple of months, about $10,000 was a huge help in the $50,000 plus amount we've had to spend on lawsuits. So thank you for all of your support and ongoing support. The point was, we set this up for one main reason, as you guys remember. It was not just the single donations, but let's get some recurring people who want to donate $1 a month on a recurring donation. Let's get that building. That's what we all need in this field. And then everybody, not a single recurring donation ever succeeded through this platform. In this donation, none of them were able to. I got many different things sent to me showing that they were declined, wouldn't go through, just didn't happen. So here's the thing to think about. And this is how the kind of suppression financially works in the field. And it's not left or right. It's anybody challenging the power structure. If we would have gotten $10,000 in recurring donations, we don't need to worry about any. That could have sustained what we're doing for an incredibly long time. And then, of course, we would try to build from there. The point is, we didn't get that. We got the lump of amount, and then it fell off. And so this is how this stuff happens, in my opinion. So I want to show you this is what we're still dealing with. This is what most people, this is somebody who just reached out again, saying from that and all the way to this point forward, has still been trying to donate. And it says simply, your debit card it says that it's been declined for the last American Vagabond. And he has gone through this over and over more than once. And it's shown me personally that it's not an issue with anything other than just not letting it happen for this one thing. Tried again on the 27th, been declined. And it's simply because it's the last American Vagabond. Or at the very least, it's just not letting it in this one transaction and everything else is happening. So just for you guys to know that it is happening. And this is kind of, now we want to get into the idea of like debanking, for example. It's not like we're being put yet anyway, kicked out of banks, but is this not the same thing in reverse? Or people are literally trying to send money to people that they want to support with their funds, and the banks are saying, not that one. It's obviously, this is not new. We all know this is happening. But as we step into this digital infrastructure, the technocratic control structure, anybody anti-Israel or any anti-genocide ecosphere where that just it's not allowed or it doesn't apply, we know where this goes. And again, be clear about this, guys. If you think for 1 second this is only one side of the paradigm, then you haven't been paying attention. It's obvious that the main problems are endorsed by all the sides, or the government. But I wanted to point that out to start so you guys can see that that is still going on. And I'll include some different things for you guys if you want to help support this platform, as I tend to do at the end, not even all the time. I will show you now if you can support us here on the website. Just the general donate page is right there, which is how you can do that through a few different options, through Stripe, through direct donation. The mailing address is right there if you want to click that. It's at the bottom. I'll include that. I didn't mean to click it. No, it's going. Well, it's right here. Or actually, I'm sorry. If you go through the process in this, that gives you an option of mailing it, and then it provides the email. I should just place that somewhere around the homepage, quite frankly. But on top of that, if you guys would like to support us otherwise, we have a lot of different ways to do so here, like Bitcoin donation, Litecoin, or really anything. Reach out to me. We can take an address for anything, Cash App, Subscribe Star, all sorts of stuff, guys. But as always, we need your support. Or you could go to things like BitChute, for example, where they have donation models on there. But I would argue you go to platforms like this to do so, other than pretty much everything else. Now, starting with the hypocrisy spending, I really find this so I said this the last show. I get buried. I spend way too much time doing this because it is really interesting. I recommend you try it. Take the time. Take any one of these links and hit this little flag at the top left, USA spending. And it brings you to the homepage. Hit start searching awards. Okay. And then just mess around with it. There's a whole bunch of metrics. To just so you know what I tend to do very specifically is I go into the time here and I enter in the date that the administration took over, which is 1/20/2025. And then I put the date of today, whatever date that is, and then just do, for sake of conversation, which I know that's not the date, put that in there. Boom. There's the date. Okay. And then go to keyword and type in whatever keyword you're looking for. Now, it's not completely always, sometimes there's a little bit of deviation, some nuance, but generally speaking, it's pretty specific. So you type in USAID, for example, and hit search, and it will give you multiple categories of contracts, grants, different things. Grants tend to be more of what I see as most of the way that we've seen this play out. But, there's a whole bunch, guys. So take the time for yourself. Now, I went through it like I tend to do and just looked for a lot of things, but specifically based on what I think are the contradictions. Not because, and really because it's not about left and right, trying to show you that this is not about one side or the other, but rather it's about narrative control. It's about keeping you thinking that you're only fighting one side, so then you blindly trust the other, or, whatever the current thing is. So here's the show we recently did this on. The one point we're touching on now is the Trump admin spending reveals hypocrisy. Here is a clip that Insurrection Barbie, of course, put out today, or rather on the 24th, and it says, I need people to listen to this and realize, of course, Democrats are never allowed to have power again. It's just so funny that people can act like it's an intelligent take to box out half the country, you know what I mean? Or rather, specifically half of the illusion of the country, because most people don't partake in either side. Now, that's why I'm always trying to highlight for people out there that this is not an opinion, that most people see these things, guys. If you recognize, like Steve and I point out all the time, that in every single election, even the midterms, what you end up getting, the majority of people don't partake. So right there, you recognize. Now, yeah, some of that is people that are lazy, don't care, whatever. Most of it, I argue, based on my research, is people that are just tired and recognize this is nonsense. Not that it always is or has to be, shouldn't be. It should be. I find, especially if you have to live in a state of society, that the representative government or your involvement in that is important. But when we see that half of them, more than half, aren't even involved, and then of the grouping that do partake, it's always about 40-something% are registered as independent, right? So for them to come out and act like Democrats, it's one that either they're falling for the trap or they're promoting the trap. But on top of that you're just acting like this is just not an opinion on that side just doesn't matter. It's literally ignorance, guys. It's ignorance masquerading as logic. So the point is that this clip is about her rattling off things that I agree are absolutely insane, ridiculous stuff that we should never be funding, whether or not you agree with transgender X, Y, and Z. So here's the clip first. Now, I'll play just the beginning so you can hear what she's getting at.
Just add to that, and thank you. We just had a wonderful cabinet meeting, all aligned on certainly the effort to realign the government. But even at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, we've canceled a $300,000 contract educating on food justice for queer and transgender farmers in San Francisco. A similar contract we canceled in New York.
Now, I mean, in its own right, like, I get it. There are people that really do buy into this stuff. Just like, by the way, you could argue, or you could point out that on the extreme right of the side of conversation, which I think most people, including a lot of conservatives, look at and go, geez, people are ridiculous, but that's the point. There are people on the extreme sides of this that buy into the most radically cartoon aspects of both sides of the paradigm. So just to be clear, there are people that think that makes sense. But I think most people go, what? Food, equality, food, transgender? Like, it is actually illogical. What does that even mean? It's almost as if you're trying to create some cartoonish thing that is meant to be called out. You can decide what you think about it. That's just my take on it for the surface level. The point is that is crazy, in my opinion, shouldn't be funded. But what I'm about to show you is that some of that stuff is already still happening in the new administration. Sorry about that. I bumped that on accident.
Again, educating transgender and queer farmers on food justice and food equality.
I mean, what is that? I was going to say food justice, equality. What does that even mean? It's almost like that's meant to be ridiculous.
I'm not even sure what that means, but apparently the last administration wanted to put our taxpayer dollars towards that. We canceled a $600,000 contract out of Louisiana that was studying the menstrual cycles of transgender men, a $600,000 contract.
Just wait. Keep all this in mind. You might be like, if you're going, yeah, it's so great, just wait. You're going to find the exact same things that are currently being funded. Well, I shouldn't say exact same, but that's the way this goes. It's going to be similar dynamics about transgender. You'll see. It's coming up next.
We canceled another contract out of a university in the middle of the country that focused on getting more diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Those two.
Into our pest management industry. Again,
what you could argue that means is hiring men and women and trans and whatever all in the pest field. Like, what the hell does that matter? Like, the idea that we ever tried to, the larger point, guys, is you take the different sides of this, and it's not, what the woke side over here, but like we can discuss even right, we're going to get to the immigration aspect and a violation of Constitution. All it really comes down to is a violation of your rights on every angle, right? So on the woke side of it, what we're talking about, like forcing things on people that are hiring, or, at the end of the day, things that should not be the government's decision. I should be able to hire whoever I want based on who I want for my business. And people can choose to use that business if they want to. And if you go there and think that I'm being discriminatory or whatever else, then you can choose to go somewhere else. Maybe that's what you want. The point is about liberty, actual liberty. And yes, within that, there are times when people can be offended. Oh my gosh. But see, the thing is, right now, you can see the right outraged and offended, or, how they want to frame it, about certain things that are happening today, or getting people fired from their jobs for bad jokes, or going after people. It's the same things, guys. At the end of the day, it comes down to a removal of your rights because of justification. When we all at some point around the conversation stand up and say, shall not be infringed, except for when they do that or when they do this. Well, no, that's not how that works. So just keep that in mind. So here, I clipped this out from the other show. Now, I'm not going to play it. It's about 20 minutes, but I'll skim through and show you some things. I said, what about Trump's admin still funding outrageous items just like this, including male circumcision in Africa for HIV prevention, or climate change related funding, all of which is happening? Or will you choose to ignore it like anything else that exposes the two-party grift? Now, what I think is really crazy about this, I posted that underneath as a comment, and I posted this over here. I even had it pinned for a while on my platform. Okay, this simply said, everyone rightly calling out the absurd USAID spending by Biden should also be calling out the Trump admin currently funding male circumcision in Africa for HIV. Same stuff. But think about this, guys. I've what is it now? Let's see, my follower count has gone down to now, since it drops all the time. Lose a few thousand here and there. 74,000 followers. Okay, so to argue that I can post this, sometimes I'll post things and it'll state, let's just say earlier today, hours have gone by and it's got 1,200 views. I mean, guys, that just doesn't make any sense. Like, you can come back to it the next day. You'll see. Look at the view count. Look at the engagement. So that's the point. It's not about the shares, likes. It's about the engagement. So based on the way this is supposed to work, people who choose to look for I follow, which means I want to see his work in my feed, which let's remember people follow lots of people, right? But see, logically, this is always what I point out, when you look at the metrics, if you have so many followers, you should get, generally speaking, a certain percentage of that on average, if this was an accurate, not censoring platform, right? Because those people want to see your content, so it will show up in their feed if they scroll or they sit there, right? Especially if they have the bell clicked, which a lot of people do. The problem is that if I have 74,000 followers and these things get 1,000 views, then it's proving to you that that's not even the case. And I mean views, like engagement, meaning it's just if they scroll by, that counts. So, and you can compare that to people like on this side of it, where she posts a random video with it's the same thing in reverse. She has less than 1 million followers. The engagement gets 1.1 million views. Right? I mean, it should just show realistically, that wouldn't surprise me if that's accurate, because you have 1 million followers, you're probably going to get people that look at it, right? That's just on a side point, just recognizing that stuff like this should be getting more attention, not whether I share it or not, but because it is a huge, huge political partisan contradiction. I mean, is that not like the bread and butter of what gets viral on this platform? It's incredible. But so here, before we get into the next part of it, is what we just showed you before. Some spending points. I just want to make this very clear. And I want to do this early in the show because this is just a really quick rapid succession of just straight up blatant hypocrisy. Now, really quickly, that's me talking from the day before yesterday, just so that's clear. So just in case there's any overlap, I want to make it clear in case it sounds like I'm saying something that happened today and it was 2 days ago, just so you know that. So I'm not going to play the whole thing, just the opening. There's always some narrative about how some secret holdover, and if you're gonna, it's certainly possible, right, that there's a holdover from the Democrats or
jump ahead a little bit.
This one, I could go through each one of these. There's like 4 that they just kind of keep saying over and over. One of which is circumcision in Mozambique, and we keep hearing it because it sounds crazy, because it is crazy. Now, when you understand, and this is not in any way, well, I should say first of all that all of these categories, I'm not highlighting this as good or bad. Even though I definitely, at some points, I will jump in and tell you my opinion, but overall, it's not about whether these are good or bad for this point today. It's about the fact that we have been told these things have been stopped, that this is why we have to fight the USAID plan, which I agree USAID is a problem, even though they're not doing that. They're continuing it on the State Department. That they're saying, this is why. Look at all the dumb things they were spending. Okay, then if you think that, then stand back and explain to me why they're continuing to fund those things and why that makes sense. I just want to trigger this critical thought for people. So one of the main things you hear are things like that. Mozambique, circumcision. Now, what's interesting before we go over just this one category, and don't take this as me saying this should be done, I want to make a very clear line here that I think, like a lot of people in this country right now think, even some that want foreign spending for help, for whatever they believe they're going to help people around the world, that right now, most people in this country are saying, how about we just stop all of it until we figure out what's going on? Agree. That's what a lot of people feel. Mozambique circumcision is interesting because the main point, you can just look at one of these many different PolitiFact checks or whatever. This is not to say what this is basically showing you is that the argument is, so you don't just think it's some random thing. I mean, it still is, by the way, I don't think that's what they're really doing it for. This is me speaking today, by the way, which is ultimately that the argument is that circumcision is one of the best ways to prevent the spread of HIV or whatever they're dealing with. Whatever you think about that, just that's what the argument is. So you can understand why some people might go, no, that's necessary, whatever. So, and my point would be that at some level, people that are doing this, like the people on the ground with the USAID, not realizing they're part of some regime change engine, who might think they're helping people. And maybe in some cases they are. That's not the point. The point is that is still happening right now under HIV predominantly, which I want to point out later after a couple videos. I think there's more to that about why there's this weird overarching focus on HIV more than anything. I'll come back to that. That I agree this should be done, but the point they make in this, just the one I want to highlight, efforts that be taken to prevent the spread. Again, none of us should be okay with that being 4. 2 of which, 11 different things are funding something that mentions circumcision. I'm only going to show you 4, 2 of which specifically relate to Mozambique. So here is one. This is the Department of Health and Human Services. This is most of them. The trustees of Columbia and University in the state of New York. The simple point. There's a long thing you can read here. It goes over a lot of health stuff. The main point, increased coverage of HIV prevention services, including voluntary medical male circumcision. Okay. So is that not what we're talking about? Right? I mean, look, guys, it's wild to me. Just scrolling back. It's a male circumcision program in Mozambique. Okay, so here we are literally talking about the exact same thing. HIV prevention, voluntary male circumcision. And two of these are literally with Mozambique. So it's actually crazy to me. So here, there's 2 points to make. That one, that it's just, we live in an illusion that everything would lie about everything. And we're debating about false divisions, but that there's a corporate media structure that we're told is desperate to get rid of Trump and go after Elon. And yet these things are just laying out there for them. People like us point them out. And can you imagine if we're to believe they're going after them? If they could stand up and go, you just claimed, like the argument being that they're all supportive of the USAID and that it's like they're all the Democrats who want the woke stuff and they're trying to fight against the Democrats who want the woke stuff, right? So then wouldn't they stand up and go, well, then why are you funding the same thing? Bombshell, mic drop. Why doesn't that happen? I mean, guys, you have to recognize at some level there's an interest in maintaining this puppet show. I mean, that's how I see it. Either way, tell me why that's not a big deal. And I don't mean because in the sense of like that's more important than genocide or major things and deportation or whatever you think is important in this country. It's a big deal because it shows you the illusion. It's a big deal for breaking down people who are lost in the two-party illusion that keeps you from actually changing this country. It goes over a lot of health stuff. The main point, increased coverage of HIV prevention services, including voluntary medical male circumcision. Okay. So if we're going to be logically consistent here, we might want to ask why Donald Trump's administration, specifically this month, has spent $14 million to fund, in part, circumcision. And this is specifically in, where was the location? I mean, honestly, the location should be irrelevant, but I believe it was somewhere, in Tanzania.
Yeah, that one's Tanzania.
So it's kind of irrelevant. All this thing, one country, the Republic of Tanzania. This alone, and that, by the way, that was $14 million. So that's obviously relevant. $14 million Donald Trump's administration has dumped in March 6th of this year, March 6th, 2025, put $14 million in the hands of Tanzania's government, apparently, allegedly, for male circumcision. Well, it's one part of a larger HIV program, of which included male circumcision. Should be that's the exact same story with a little bit different flavor, right? A little bit different propaganda, but the same damn thing. It's just not in the interest of the partisan control structure to make that contradiction because they, I think, need you outraged about the woke direction to get you blinded to the new coming direction. This $14 million sustained should cause outrage. That seems wild to me. In the Republic of South Africa, okay, that one's $15 million. Same thing. Provision of voluntary medical male circumcision for HIV prevention in South Africa. So maybe not Mozambique. Is it Mozambique that you're outraged about? Or is it the fact that they're funding right now in multiple ways? These are just 4 contracts and already over $30 million. Can you imagine what that would do for Americans right now? How about the ones that are suffering in North Carolina? I guess we just went past that already, huh? Yeah. So is it only Mozambique that we're upset with? Or again, that there's a whole bunch of. And if you actually go through these guys, many of these have like multiple fundings, like, in just since March. This one's only one. Here's another one. This one is $7.1 million. 7.1. This was on March 17th. I should just mute it and scroll. There's HIV prevention, voluntary male circumcision. Like, okay, so here's what's crazy. If we're going to pretend that they had to cancel one program, right, for male circumcision, but yet now currently got multiple programs going on for male circumcision when they're still funding to this very moment, shouldn't that be a bigger deal? Shouldn't we go outraged, woke, right, funding male circumcision? Yeah, we really should. Now, this goes on, and I go into a few different things, okay? I go into, trying to scroll and see without going too far. Okay, here's one. This was, so I go into basically COVID-19, mRNA, and climate change. And you probably won't be surprised if you're watching this show to recognize that Donald Trump's administration is quite literally funding things around climate change. Access to community. This one is just community HIV testing. I mean, they're spending millions upon millions upon millions of dollars to, most of this, especially today, again, seems to be centered around HIV. Now, you as well as I, especially Republicans probably, who were paying attention more during COVID-19, who recognize that there's a wildly clear overlap to the whole AIDS HIV ploy illusion to the reality of the COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 game. It's the same thing. We have to recognize that what they literally did with these injections was create an autoimmune disorder that's basically like, this is what people argue, is that ultimately that what they called AIDS was really just it was a problem that was created by the same response. Now, that's for you to decide. The reality is what we know, and again, I've gone over all of this. I just don't want to dive into it now. We went over this during COVID-19 that you can prove, whether you think some of it is what they claim, that what they gave people in those shots literally caused, you could call it HIV. You could call it what they call it, immune suppressive kind of dynamic that's caused the same kind of outcome that they then claim is another issue. But the problem here, guys, is that that's just the reason I'm trying to show that is because it's weird that there's all this background funding specifically around some HIV kind of infrastructure, when that seems to be the easiest way to categorize like a whole lot of what these COVID, well, just mRNA shots have caused. And as they're rolling out a massive platform they claim for cancer, but it'll be more, you wonder if they're just getting ahead of it. And what's funny about it, guys, is a lot, probably most conservatives would have gone absolutely if I was talking about the Biden administration, and far too many of them would ignore it if I was talking about the Trump. But I don't believe all of them. I just want to show you at least one of these before I go forward. This was COVID-19. And that's the same thing. There's funding, COVID-19 data tracking, COVID-19 investigation, all sorts of things that shouldn't make sense right now, seeing as how we're past that, at least as they tell us. More funding for mRNA, like genetic what was the one was about killer cells and different aspects, all again around HIV, but all mRNA research that gain of function. That's what we're talking about. Here, this one is just, you could see, and there's plenty of these. Environmental indicators and population modeling to support climate change impact assessment. Does it sound like something Trump's administration would be funding? They are. Now, again, I'm not trying to say good or bad. I mean, I would even argue in some, let me just get it right down to the money here. There you go. So almost $400,000. Now there's aspects of that. There's aspect of climate. Many different climate change things. I'll leave it there since there's a lot. Watch the whole thing. So back to the reality. The same point, that they're sitting here calling out these things. And I simply point out, well, here's examples of them doing that now. An honest reporter would care about that, because if it's about the ideology, about the person, the cult of personality, well, then you're not really a journalist. If it's about the outcome, the content, the not allowing this because it's bad for America, well, then this should be the same story. But we know it's not. We know why. Now here, I'm going to show you some things about what she was pointing out in that video, okay? Talking about transgender, agriculture, whatever. Now this is just what is it? Looks like 8 of them. And I think I've included, oh no, I think I closed it. I usually keep open the actual search so you can look at the other contracts, but simple, like I showed you. Put the date in, search for the word transgender, and it will pop up. So this is also USAID, by the way. Funny how USAID's been shuttered, except they're still funding the transgender research or transgender, and by the way, through Rubio, through the State Department, through Trump's administration. Now this says, and again, you can read all, there's always you get the full paragraph. It goes in and saying USAID is phased in 3 year. There's just a lot of stuff they write. Delivery to support existing implementer. What does it say? PEPFAR supported provinces with progressive. Okay. The point is, I'm trying to encapsulate the part that's relevant, but also what this means in general. And so it says this service delivery activity will include all aspects of the HIV epidemic control of key and vulnerable populations, transgender people who inject drugs, and people in prison. So this is just simply an overlap. But this program focuses specifically, or one part of, which is transgender people and prevention of HIV. That's what a lot of these seem to be related to. Now, even if the aspect of the HIV doesn't, or rather the transgender part doesn't interest you, why are we funding HIV prevention in other countries, this is the Congo? It's the same point. And this one is for almost $1 million. That was in February after Trump's administration took power. HHS, so that's RFK Jr., advancing sustainable implementation of comprehensive HIV prevention and treatment programs in faith-based and private sites in Nairobi, coast and western regions in the Republic of Kenya. And down here, it specifically mentions transgender people. The proposed project will implement the voluntary male medical circumcision program. Well, now we've got a whole overlap. We've got transgender focus, we've got male circumcision, and we've got HIV prevention and make sure that it is sustainable and that they are faith-based programs in Nairobi and Africa and Kenya. And that is for $2 million. That's happened March 3rd of this year. That's Health and Human Services. This one is for $600,000. That was about a week after they took power. And this one, it says effectiveness and implementation of text messaging to improve HIV testing in sexual and gender minority adolescents, transgender girls, and gender diverse teens. Okay. Important to not just focus on the HIV testing, but make sure we're studying the text messaging and how that can improve the transgender HIV. And, to me, it may not sound as ridiculously cartoonish as transgender diversity for agriculture, whatever she was saying. But you have to realize it's like I always talk about. It is the same point. Now, really, just objectively, this should be just as crazy for anybody who actually cares about what the spending was going to, especially since it's the same category. My point is that, as I said before with USAID and others, it's a means to an end. Yes, there is some movement through this, but if you understand historically or just the broader picture of what these are, they're not trying to influence you to use proper pronouns or DEI. This is about a means to an end for what they militarily or geopolitically want to accomplish in foreign countries. It's very simple. Just books been written about this forever. Today we're just overtaken by a bunch of people who woke up in 2020 and think they know everything about everything because they start listening to people in the mainstream alternative media. The problem is that this is just the new direction. And I think what we're seeing here, and not this in particular, but we're seeing them develop that. What I think this is sort of holdovers from that. This is still, whatever this is aimed at, that excuse is still working on the ground in this location. That's what I think it is. But that's completely my opinion. The only point that I'm making based on the facts is this is still happening. And that should matter, obviously. $600,000. This one, also USAID. Weirdly, after it's been shuttered, new LGBTQI USPSC program advisor supporting the Bureau for Development, Democracy, and Innovation, inclusive development hub programs protecting the human rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex individuals. See, I saved the good ones for the latter part. In case you thought it wasn't going to be something more, even those before were obviously the same thing. But you could try to make an argument for why it's just including them in the category. No, this is explicitly clear. This is for, this one's important, by the way, because this is what I want to point out. As we showed before, not only did they fund this in 2025, the point, though, is that they continued the direction. And I thought this one was the most standing out because we're talking about LGBTQ programs for inclusive development of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. I mean, it sounds like if you walk up to the street and said Trump funded this, nobody would believe you or his administration. Or some holdover Democrat, which is always the excuse. But what I want you to see is not only did they continue the program, they took action. They could have ignored this entirely, and that still would have continued it. The point is, on 3 days after they took power, they touched base with this, and they took other administrative action and continued the program. That's what that shows you. And that's what's under disclosed awardees, undisclosed, or rather domestic, which I find interesting. So just recognize that this stuff is not stopping. Now, the point right now, there's no more funding, but they've continued the program. It didn't go away. It's not zeroed out. And there's more that's likely going to come when nobody's paying attention. This one is also HHS. Strategies to prevent HIV acquisition among transgender men who have sex with men, she just said the same thing, are at risk of HIV acquisition in the U.S. and require gender-affirming, culturally responsive biobehavioral HIV prevention strategies. Is that what you want to fund, conservatives? You currently are through Trump's administration. That's about $881,000 that went. But interestingly, they put that back. They took money back, it looks like, but still about $100,000 for the program. That's where it ended after February 21st, and it is still ongoing. This one, HHS, AIDS United. Up here it just says National Capacity Building Assistance for Strengthening HIV Syndemic Systems and Services. That's the broad point. But it says providing TA on harm reduction, transgender, non-conforming community services, social detriments of health. That is for $1.2 million as of March 12th. This one is from HHS. Oh, it looks like the highlighting went away. What was this one for? So this one, they spent almost $1.2 million, March 13th. And it says, that's in Spanish. It says, the emergence of the AIDS epidemic coincided with public health reformulations, definitions, and guidelines. saying that they're originating from the United Health System, which provided universal, equitable, and comprehensive health services. That is while the detection rate of the virus in general population is 0.4, talking about, I think HIV still, saying that transsexual women, transvestites, the rates all they're mentioning there, given the gaps in the Brazilian cascade. I just think that was basically the point. Just make sure I didn't miss anything. Improved engagement of transgender populations with health services. But again, generally around the HIV testing, which why would we be funding that? Why are we funding for HIV prevention testing in Brazil? Because I don't think that's what it's really about, guys, unless they're preparing for something else. $1.1 million. This one's HHS for 1.2, it's a close amount, $1.27 million on March 12th. And this one is for UCSF Center of Excellence for Transgender Health. Last one, and there's plenty more, by the way. There was probably 20 different tabs just under grants. This is for $100,000. And it reads, National Research Center on Poverty and Economic Mobility. It says a multifaceted fellowship program that places researchers on site at HHS. Find that interesting. It says these efforts will greatly expand and diversify the cores of poverty researchers working on questions related to equity, inclusion, diversity, and access in economic mobility and human services policy, and will put actionable findings and data into the hands of federal agencies to inform policymaking. Well, again, like I said before, it's not about good, bad, left, right. You can decide for yourself. But I think it's pretty clear that most conservatives wouldn't agree on spending around equality, inclusivity, diversity, and so on. That's the buzzwords they love to use, as you just heard in the clip we were showing you before. So same point, guys. You know as well as I, if this was on any other, if Insurrection Barbie shared this, well, who knows? Maybe actually they would push back and ostracize her from the community, because how dare you share the facts around bad Trump? But the point is, you know as well as I, is that this went through a certain channel, that this would be huge. And it should be. Somebody else put it out there. Don't even give me credit for it. Take the video, make the point information out there, get it out there. It's important that this gets seen to show you how completely hypocritical this all is. I just thought that was important to see, because the reality is it's not left or right, guys. If you can see clearly that they're funding the same things, ask yourself what that means. Is that because they both want transgender health studies? How could we possibly believe that? It's about the narrative. It's about what they need to do, and this is my opinion, to achieve the end. That's the same thing they're doing to you right now. And Trump made sure to tell you that the ends will justify the means. So, but as long as we get where we tell you want to go, then it doesn't matter how we get there. Well, yes, more than anything in the world, it matters how you get there. Now, some positive things around health that I think are important. Robin Minotti shared this. This was on the 26th. That's today. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya is the new NIH director. He said, I will establish a culture of respect for free speech and science and scientific dissent in NIH. It's great to hear. Dissent is very essence of science. I will foster a culture where NIH leadership will actively encourage different perspectives and allow expression of disagreement. Great. That sounds fantastic. Well, if that does come to pass and he continues to do that going forward, then this is fantastic. But I do want to point out, and just to be clear, I think this is a major positive step in the, I mean, especially since we've seen who's been there before, whether a Collins or a Fauci character. This is a major positive direction. But I will point out there's a lot of people in the, whatever you want to call it, the people that were calling out COVID-19, largely the doctor side of it, that have some concerns. That I'd rather just, there's a lot about what he might do that seems a little bit too close to mainstream for me as well. That doesn't mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's right. Maybe we just disagree. The bottom line is I do think this is a good step. So we'll see what goes forward. But just like we've seen with RFK, if all of a sudden they start rolling out mRNA shots or they start studying the same things with a different narrative and we're doing it the right way, then I'm going to call it out like we all should. I mean, if you agree. My point is, like with the mRNA cancer shot direction, I don't care if it's the right person doing it for the right reason at this point. I don't believe that what they're doing with that is where we should be going right now. And that's why I express my opinion about it, as my right to do so. You can feel free to disagree. And if I'm in the minority, then that's how that works. But I argue that most people in this country, for obvious reasons, are dramatic. I mean, more than most topics, are adamant that we do not want to go in that direction, especially right now. At the very least, that we want this to flesh out way more before we start rolling out platforms for children, right? So on the note of him again, I think this is a major positive step. But we'll have to wait and see if there's, more of a bait and switch around it, just like we should with anybody. That's not to say that that's what we expect, right? Whether, like, that's what I would say, like, if somebody who I wanted to begin to power suddenly, or rather, as if that's what I want in the larger sense, and I'm forced to live in this society, if there was somebody that took power that I thought was a better direction, as I keep telling people in the partisanship, I would make a point to be more critical of them than anybody because I expect more from them. That's just the way this should work, guys. You should be holding their feet to the fire because you expect the best. Now, on a point of overlap in regard to health, and this will roll us into the alarming direction of where this health the AI, mRNA, Great Reset health direction that seems to be rolling out despite different narratives. We talked about this on AM Wake Up. This is what everyone's been calling this out, and rightly so, there has been basically zero challenge on the mRNA direction, or even just the COVID shot, guys, despite that being a central point of his entire direction before he took power in the Trump administration. That is like the one thing that people expected that hasn't happened. Not a single pushback. In fact, they've rolled out mRNA shots or working on them with Moderna for a bird flu. They've also conditionally approved, I think even more than that now, bird flu shots for animals. Like this is, we all know that's not the direction. But he wrote on the 24th, instead of inspiring universal condemnation, October 7th, of course, for the podcast, you all probably expected that, the Health and Human Services Director focused on health and MAHA would lurch into October 7th for the 45th time at that position, right? It's anybody logical is going, why is from that? Go on. If you want to talk about these things or make these cases, that's fine. We have a right to do that. But he is standing there as somebody in this administration from a position of health and making statements through that about October 7th. Like he did about the anti-Semitism task force, calling it a plague and trying his best to kind of conflate it with his position, but it in no way made sense. The universal condemnation, instead of that, even though it did, though, by the way, look, the vast majority of people, including those that recognize that anybody occupied has the legal right to armed resistance, still condemned the crimes that were committed. The fact that they still lie about that shows you how desperate this all is, or the fact that we had evidence before and well after that there was foreknowledge here, allowance of some kind, ignorance, choosing to ignore what they saw coming. None of them want to talk about this, or, the major elephant in the room that Israel has been provingly funding Hamas in some way or another right up until October 7th. How can something that central and that wildly verified not be included to this point? Because these are dishonest people or compromised. That's what I think. And that doesn't have to be in every single category, but definitely right here. But it says the October 7th Holocaust, he says, triggered a global wave of anti-Semitism. The Holocaust, so literally it continues to support the ongoing genocide in Gaza or Syria or Lebanon, but has the nerve to call what happened on October 7th the Holocaust. Right? Think about how insulting that is, especially for the real people in history that have gone through an actual Holocaust, or realizing that most of the people that died that day were killed by Israel. These are facts, ladies and gentlemen. Their own media have covered this, but they don't care. Ivy League campuses became a greenhouse for poison. See, I'm using the word that kind of make this feel like it's somehow in the health vein. And the global wave of anti-Semitism. No, that's been provable. Even even Orthodox Jewish communities have called this out. They called every Palestinian flag an anti-Semitism event. The ADL was literally caught for that. The 400% increased number that they all use, that's what they're pointing to. That was the vast majority were Palestine support. And they lie about it to this very day, just like they lie about atrocity propaganda. We just heard Schumer again, or even Trump. They keep yelling about beheaded babies or rape allegations. These things have been proven to not have even happened by Israeli media. And everybody else, by the way, all the way back to the beginning. But it says Trump has ordered his cabinet to use every constitutional tool to uproot his diversity. Yeah, seriously? You know why he made that point to say constitutional? Because it's quite literally the most unconstitutional thing I've ever seen. Well, I shouldn't say that, but it is one of the most unconstitutional things I've seen a president do so publicly and so brazenly. Which is, we'll go into that today. And he says, I'm glad Columbia has agreed to this first step. But don't forget the Columbia University, where the dean is literally a former Israeli spy. And she is married to the head, or at one point was the head of the UN mission to Israel. Right? That's weird. That's confusing. Though Israel's presence at UN, he was the head of it. She married that person. And there's another overlaps, by the way, with Israel to her. That doesn't have to prove that she's compromised. Certainly matters when this is all about Israel. And take the first step, and will begin to restore itself as a garden of tolerance, reason, compassion, respect. I mean, this is why, in a lot of ways, this government and this country has rapidly become a laughingstock of the world. And that's not something I say with pleasure, guys. That makes me sad, because the reality is most people recognize that a lot of Americans, if not most, like I do in reverse for other countries that this government lies about, they recognize we don't agree with this, with a lot of it. Nonetheless, what they see every day, because that's what they want people to see, is the ridiculous, cartoonish idiocracy that is the partisanship. That's what we see in the world. And they laugh at us. They laugh at how easy it is to manipulate Americans, that Netanyahu proudly says more than once on video, how easy it is to just play them against each other. And yet it still happens. Because frankly, the people that do it and are involved in it, most of them know it and don't care because they're benefiting from it. But here is what Glenn said. What does any of this have to do with Make America Healthy Again? Combating chronic disease and childhood obesity, eliminating big pharma and big ag capture of U.S. regulatory processes, ridding U.S. food supply of toxic additives, and everything else we were told Maha would do. Now, there's been some movement in some of those directions. That just being objective about it, that is true. None of which I would argue is officially changed something indefinitely, other than, I mean, even the sunscreen direction. We haven't seen any real change. We've heard things stated. That's not to say that I was very happy about what he said about that and the motions beginning, but we haven't seen the trickle down happen. We haven't seen the actual agencies, the FDA, for example, really do anything. So is he just a figurehead and he's been neutered by something else? I mean, you tell me. When we see something really begin to transition, then you tell me and we'll point it out. The problem is, this is what we seem focused on right now. I mean, in the chat, you tell me. Genuinely, is there something that has been rolled out that we've seen actual change? Now, I'm not saying whether we think it will happen or that, the good thing has been said or even a legislation has begun. Have we seen something begin to change in our lives where it actually affects what we're doing? I haven't seen it. Now, on top of that, we have things like this continue, whether it's I forget the person's name, that in regard to our health, the person put in a position that is all about seed oils, right? Which is totally the opposite we're promised. Or there's so many that you just blank on these things every day. Gosh, it's incredible how many contradictions and lies there are. But now we see the example of the CDC director nominee, Susan Menarez. As Champagne Joshi points out, oh, look, here's Trump's new CDC director nominee on DARPA TV. That's what it is, literally discussing how AI will accelerate better health outcomes. Gee, it's almost like they're coordinating in one very clear direction, guys. We're going to go into that in a second. This is where it's all being funneled. I almost wanted to make that the title today, but I didn't have that much of a focus on it. Just this is the AI direction for everything, guys. This is what's coming. They're not even hiding it. And here's what David Icke says. Well, here's the thing. They're not hiding it because they know that they've effectively got the partisan screamers looking everywhere else, which then they draw most of the people looking too. David Icke says they are taking the piss. This is Trump's vaccine, in quotes, obsessed nominee for head of the CDC. Because that's the case. Look at her comments around masks and lockdowns and vaccines. This should scare everybody that cares about any of this stuff, guys. I'm willing to bet you anything you're going to get excuses and justifications from the insurrection Barbie cat turd inner circle around Elon Musk. And I say that not in the sense of the real, the people that are most out there with millions of followers yelling just whatever it seems they want. Just not fact-based information, not we are the media now, just basic text on Twitter files nonsense, half the time, which turns out to immediately be false, and it all just continues forward. Get your COVID booster, she's talking about, pushing AI healthcare, exactly in line with the AI control agenda. She's been the deputy director of ARPA-H, which don't forget, we talked about that a long time ago. HARPA was how it originally rolled out, and that was Biden, or rather just Democrat side of it, and then Trump rolls out with his daughter the ARPA-H, because it's totally different, not the same thing. But that's the simple way they made you think that it wasn't the same. It was the continuity of the same program through left and right. Same thing came out. They just gave you a little bit. They put the H on the end because we're that easy to confuse. And then it says, and it's based on DARPA. That's obviously same point, but like on a health side of it, the technological development arm of the Pentagon manipulating for total AI control, DARPA. And this is the health side of it. So if you don't see how this is developing, guys, it is that same agenda. That's what COVID-19 represented in one part. Now, that's why Derek wrote about this in regard to the Stargate program and why this is kind of the central rollout starting point of a lot of this, which is why it was such a shock to most conservatives, because it's the exact opposite of what was promised. Trump partners with technocrats to promote mRNA injections, AI, and transhumanism. SoftBank, which again, watch this show if you don't remember. Like, I mean, it is a cutout for Israel in a large way. They basically back the vast majority of their startup 8,200 connected companies around the world. That's SoftBank. They're also the chief financier of the entire Stargate project. And I think he's actually the director or one of the leading positions. But then you've got Larry Ellison, Oracle, of the group that has been scooping up all of your data ever since the beginning of COVID-19. That was the pharmacovigilance, which we've never gotten to see. They promised they wouldn't use it like this, and now here we are. Then you've got Sam Altman with OpenAI, which, by the way, was Elon was a part of that. They claim to have separated, even though they're part of the same administration. It seems obvious. Most of what we get today seems like noise and distraction. But as I called it, the AI biomedical control grid, because that's really what I think it comes down to. This is the same conversation from my show that I talked about the Stargate. Now, an interesting overlap to this before we get into specifically the digital ID Save Act kind of shell game, if you will. Teachers for Choice put out a really interesting article or just conversation about whether or not your biometrics, which we've been talking about this for so long in so many different ways. What does it mean? You know, what does it mean for them to have all of your biometrics on file? Like I say every time, I don't think I don't know. I don't think any of us know what that means truly in 20 years, in 5 years, when we're in some dystopian technocratic society, or let's just say a rapidly advanced technological direction. What does it mean for some kind of company to own what makes you in a biometric sense? And also have access most likely to all of your medical data, all of your face scans, all of your, which I guess same thing, but basically what it would take to recreate you in some sense, whether in the real life or digital twin. Now, who knows? Maybe that's crazy. Maybe it'll never happen. But why do you think they're so desperately trying to scoop this up? One side of it is for control in regard to social credit, in regard to digital IDs, in regard to accessing the internet, or any kind, like, look at what's going on in China. We have to see how clear this is. It's not secret, right? It's not some conspiracy theory. It's literally happening in some places in the world that they point to as their model. So will Maha, he asks, protect your biometric data? Seeing as how this is where it's rushing into, I don't think that's even on the table right now. So he says, from biological markers to smart bassinets. I mean, guys, this is getting crazy. From like the smart fridge, like it's getting to the point to where everything everywhere has some kind of sensor relaying information back to something. So biological markers to smart bassinets for your baby. Our health privacy is being invaded. Frankly, I think that happened a long time ago. But what does Maha think about this? He asks, and he says, who controls and owns our data is a critical question in 2025 and beyond. When it comes to health, we need to think about data and tracking, not just in terms of our personal medical records, but also wearable technology, our biometric privacy invasion, which is drastically on the rise. This type of tracking is now emerging from the cradle to the grave, quite literally. Will this invasive tracking make America healthy again? Caldy Means, a new and prominent leader in the Maha movement, is the founder of a company called TrueMed that is designed, to create new incentives for alternative healthcare options. The company assists people to secure insurance funds to subsidize healthy living options. Through this system, the cost of your gym membership or vitamins can be reimbursed through your insurance, and as can many other genuinely healthy options. Sounds great, right? Now, maybe it is all great. Maybe this is just not, the next part. Maybe it's not where, who knows? Think for yourself about it. The point is, typically, when there is a problem, if you think that's one of these here, these kind of things are used to get you, it's the window dressing, right? And in some cases, they are there, and it is good. But right behind it, there's something much darker they don't want you to see, and they hope that will distract you. I'm not saying that's for sure this. You can decide for yourself. But that's what you always have to ask, right? Are they really destroying USAID, or are they just pretending to roll out something far worse? Are they really taking down the Fed, or are they just rolling out a privatized central currency? These are the things we have to ask. And I think both those were yeses, but you can decide for yourself. But he goes, sounds great, right? But one of these, quote, healthy items is what they call the Smart Baby Snoo, which is a AI-powered bassinet for your newborn. I mean, think about the kind of stuff that's going to be giving them. Literally cradle to grave, guy. But we're talking about the way you're grow, the way you're evolving as a child, scanning your biometrics as you grow, because they don't get that stuff right now. Let's realize that these are for example, what Elon, we'll get to in a second, is doing with the AI using your privacy data, your government data to train their AI models. The point was, that data is gold. You don't get that kind of data anywhere else, because online people can lie. What they get back there is like double confirmed. Like, it's important. I went through this in another show, but it's important for actually getting data that is more confirmed and more accurate for them to fully train this out. In this case, they don't get biometric data from newborns and as they develop. That's something they don't have for the most part. So this is a way to get that. Now, maybe you don't agree with that. Either way, you know that this is what is going on. The spying, the relaying of information, they're not even hiding that anymore. I mean, do they even pretend it's for your better service to improve the quality of your service anymore? I don't think they claim that. They don't even care. Most people check these boxes or don't even read terms of service. I mean, there's like 11 pages on these things with tiny writing. Nobody ever takes the time, because in most cases, you already want the thing when you're going into that process, and you don't want to go, well, never mind. You want it for some reason, so you just check the box. They know this. We need to start doing better. But it says TrueMed promotes this product, as does Kaylee Means, who shares it in the stories of his personal Instagram account. The baby snoo uses an AI algorithm to constantly monitor your baby to determine if they are sleeping comfortably. See my point? That means full scans, constant, which, by the way, means whatever else comes out of that, whether radiation or any kind of other EMF, it's not something we should ever be having constantly around your child. Or a Wi-Fi or anything like that, guys. You need to think about these things. These have very clear effects. It says if your baby cries, the baby snoo will determine what rocking pattern and which particular sound of white noise is best suited to get your child back to sleep. All right, so no less human interaction. Baby snoo uses microphones, motion sensors, algorithmic processing, and feedback loops to implement a plan to bring a crying or fussy baby back to sleep. Now, see, that sounds great, but people just don't want to deal with that. In some cases, it probably is a lifesaver for parents that are so tired, they just, that's what they're hoping for. Microphones, motion sensors. You think for 1 second that's only going to be aimed at that baby? Guys, we've already gone over this 100 other ways. Now, by the way, on a side note to the Tesla point, in case that was missed, and I don't actually think I said it on the show, but we've talked about this forever. I mean, Vault 7 and before. But my point was not only Teslas are spying on you, for crying out loud. I think damn near every vehicle is spying on you right now if it's past a certain year. The point was about in the context of the Tesla conversation. But that's a good point, because I don't think I said it, that's the case, and it's everything. So in this case, it's like we know, it's not just aimed at one, it's spying on everything. Your reactions, your heart rate, that's the biometric side of it. How you respond to things, what makes you scared, what makes them angry, makes them sad. This is alarming in ways I can't even articulate. Now it says this data can be synced to an app on the parent's smartphone to keep track of the baby's sleeping patterns. Here's the link if you want to read more from this. And it says, he says, I do know parents who have twins, 3 kids or more, some with disabilities, who have used the baby snoo, and it helped them. And of course it will, guys. It will. It's going to alleviate some of the issues. They're going to give them more time. It'll take some of the pressure off. But he goes, however, I believe TrueMed's real product is a data collection. I mean, guys, that's what they are. If you ask any of these companies what their true actual profit is, it's the data. That, as Corbett wrote so long ago, data is the new oil. Because it's the most profitable thing on the planet, it seems. And it says, I believe TrueMed's real product is data collection, and baby snoo feels like a future data grab. Now, he says, of course, TrueMed does not deal only in baby products. One of their premier products lines is called the Levels, or just Levels, which is a glucose monitoring system with an app that tracks internal biological markers monitoring blood sugar. Now, again, maybe that's a huge development for people with diabetes, and maybe it helps you tremendously. But recognize that I think they don't care about ultimately that. They care about the amount of, from a high level aspect, the amount of internal biological data, the metrics they get from this. And that doesn't even have to be conspiratorial. That's just what it is today. That is the model that these businesses recognize. It says, today, this company is valued at over $350 million and has been wildly successful. The Level system involves a wearable sensor called a continuous glucose monitor that you wear on your arm, which looks almost like a nicotine patch. The CGM is paired with a mobile app that helps users interpret the continuous data it produces. That data can be shared by Levels members all around the world. The majority of the initial funding for Levels came from a powerful firm. Guess what? Andreessen, I guess. That is the Andreessen that we know that's tied in with Palantir and all the rest of this stuff. And Trump's administration and the whole thing, guys. The same entity who is, what they just, I mean, the same overlap with Karp and the conversation he had on Joe Rogan, basically arguing that elitists need to rule the world because they're the only ones that can, there's no such thing as real democracy. It has to be an oligarchy. That's how history shows us, and that we need to be the people in control because it's best for you. And ultimately the elite, the good elites need to fight the bad elite. That's what they were laying out for you. And literally kind of citing back to this Machiavellian worldview, right? That this is that the ends justify the means. It's the same point they all seem to lean into. So do you think that for them, it's about helping people with diabetes? It says, who initially gave $12 million of funding to the startup back in 2020 and more in subsequent years. To understand, and 2020 seems like an interesting time for that. To understand what the future of levels will be, we would be wise to know what the future looks like through the eyes of Andreessen Horowitz. Essentially, the firm sees the future as what I call a biometric AI data dystopia. AI wearables, digital ID, biomedical laboratories in outer space, and a resurgence of nuclear power. The document also discusses AI super staffing in healthcare. You can read through it yourself. The point is, this is their general direction. And so even if you don't think it's nefarious, the point is that is just recognize that's what it's really about. Is that the future you want? And if not, then stop leaning into these companies that are utilizing your data to get there. Now, here's a clip. Oh, you know what? I forgot to grab this. I want to play. This is just a clip. I think we played this before of Ellison speaking. He says, an even bigger corporation we need to watch when it comes to biometric invasion is Oracle. Excuse me. Larry Ellison is the founder of Oracle, which is one of the two largest healthcare data management companies in America, the other being Epic. Ellison is also a principal stakeholder in Stargate. OpenAI is a partner in this venture, and Elon Musk has offered to purchase OpenAI for $97 billion. I don't think that happened. Has led to controversial battle now unfolding in the courts. Recently, Larry Ellison stated to improve public health, quote, you have to take all of your healthcare data, your diagnostic data, your electric health records, and move it into a single unified data platform for AI to be able to analyze all of it, right? The idea being that if we can do that, we can help you more. I mean, if we really think that what they're doing this is just to save lives, I mean, I'd love to believe that's the case. I just think it's wildly naive to think that that's why they would do this. There's no profit in that. There's no control in that. And if you look at their actions, if you look at what they're doing, it's obvious why, in my opinion. He says, I would argue that Ellison is lying here. I don't believe the goal is a single unified data platform for all health information. I believe the goal, he's speaking, I believe the goal is to monitor and surveil the population to control us. I happen to agree. So here is this clip. And what it's somebody else talking about, I'm not familiar with who it is, but I believe they're connected to him. But the point is about Ellison speaking and just kind of blithely discussing this as like what the future should be. And frankly, I don't know even, I would argue that the vast majority of either side doesn't really think this is where we should be going.
Let's listen to Larry Ellison at the Oracle Health Summit in late 2024. This was the end of October in 2024.
The interface, and I'll stop with this one, the interface to the system is not typing away and having menus. If you want to pull up someone's x-rays, you say the following, show me Larry Ellison's most recent x-rays. Actually, you say Oracle, show me Larry Ellison's most recent x-rays.
So obviously the point it's getting into is like a future situation, right? Where this, and this, to understand this, they're all very adamant about this, where privacy is really no longer a thing, right? Where this is important because we all need access to it so we all can be better. Doesn't that sound a lot like the Great Reset, you'll own nothing and be happy kind of idea, right? Where so the idea of ownership is gone because it's better for it's the same damn direction, guys. They're all in the same. That's why Trump and Milei and the rest of them went and spoke at Davos. Sure, everyone got focused on how he said pronouns are bad, even though he supported damn near everything else and is rolling out the same program, and Elon Musk is rolling out all the rest of it. It's and this is my point from the beginning. That's why people laugh right now about the partisanship, about how and what they see as Americans, which I don't believe is the majority, but the world looks and laughs about how easy it is to manipulate these people. Show them that's not the truth, right? Show them that's not what most of us think.
But you speak to the system. You speak to it. When you show up at the system looks at you. You don't log in. The system looks at you and says, hello, Dr. Bell, what can I do for you today? It recognizes you. The authentication is biometric. We're getting rid of all passwords. By sometime next year, you will not be able to use a password to log into any Oracle system because they're too easily stolen. They're not secure. Instead, we'll have biometric authentication that just recognizes you and logs you in based on that. All much easier to do and much safer. Yeah.
Right. Well, is that not exactly like the World Economic Forum videos we show you about the biometric, mental brainwave monitoring? And it's the same idea, guys. That you sit down and the system understand this. The world that they're talking about would not be that's just your computer, guys. That means wherever you're going, these systems will be recognizing who you are, scanning you. This is what China's dealing with. Is that what you want? That's currently the power. The people that are packed behind Donald Trump is what they're doing, whether you want it or not. Now, the important overlap to this is just, reasonably quickly, only because I want to wait for more development on this. But I think it's important to show you how this has continued, because we've talked about this a lot. This is in regard to the SAVE Act conversation, the Real ID, ID 2020, all these different parts of the digital ID rollout. Healthy Family Projects wrote this article entitled "Illegal at Many Levels. Trump's New Move Restricts Voting Rights Without Proper Approval." Now, this is not what I'm ultimately focused on. I think it's an interesting deviation, as always, sort of like the other conversations we were just pointing to, where the false paradigm, left and right media, go at it from this weird false binary within a binary, like where they're ultimately arguing about what. But the point to me, and I think most people that are beyond the partisan game, is not about whether we should be debating whether illegal people here illegally should be able to vote. It's like it doesn't make any sense. Like it's the same as them. It's the same as Trump and them trying to argue they can deport somebody without due process. The point is you're just disregarding the reality. Not that you disagree, you're just ignoring. In that case, if they're here illegally, they're not a citizen. That's technically, again, they shouldn't be able to vote. It's very simple. Now, that's a different conversation of whether people should be, voter identification for certain processes, which I also agree with, but to the point, that's different than that. What we're talking about is whether or not illegal aliens are allowed to vote. Because I agree, it's insane that we have people in Congress or people in power that are arguing that's the way it is. And it's like, well, okay, if you agree with that or you think that, then you should be arguing your process should be to change the legal reality. But they don't. They just disagree, even though they're fundamentally wrong. So in this case, very clearly siding with whoever is arguing that obviously it should not be okay for people who are not citizens to vote. That seems like a no-brainer. That's what they're basically discussing here. So I think it's like a red herring. It's a distraction. As says, Donald Trump has signed a new executive order that sidesteps congressional approval process, which that does matter, by the way. That whatever it's about, that's the same general point about executive orders, or the idea that they can just write this on a piece of paper and act like that changes things that are not necessarily only part of the executive branch. It's an abuse of that power. But that's everyone. That's every partisan side going back as far as you can look since executive orders have been really become a thing. But it says, in order to attempt to restrict voting rights, which, see my point from the beginning. I think this is not the reality, but it says the order borrows heavily, this is what I think is important, from the Republican-based Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, or SAVE Act, which appears likely to pass the House, but faces uncertainty future in the Senate. So the SAVE Act, which is necessary to roll out the Real ID compliant, going back all the way to 2005 after the Patriot Act, or rather, after 9/11 discussion, right? That's what it comes from, and they've been trying to do it ever since. Arguably, it seems like it's not really going to come to pass, and that's why I think Trump has now wrote the executive order to make this happen. It says, the order directs the Bipartisan Election Assistance Commission to change the federal voter registration form to require voters to show proof of citizenship. So right there, I don't understand why that's an issue for people. Doesn't that seem like something that everybody should, it makes sense. I mean, the reality of whether or not you're a citizen should matter whether you can vote in a country. I think that's pretty obvious. But it says such as a passport to a local or state official, but Morales Doyle said he cannot tell commissioners to do. It's weird. But it says the order provides a limited number of ways to prove U.S. citizenship, such as U.S. passports, an ID that complies with the Real ID Act. So I just want to make sure you saw it. The point is that it's continuing to lean into that side of it, which I think there's a coming step, which is going to invalidate anything other than what's digital for obvious reasons we'll get into in a second. Different arguments about why that is unsafe or, whatever it is. But now all they're doing is continuing to cement in my opinion, that real ID compliant identification is one major part of what's needed to be used as they then continue to try to invalidate other aspects. Now, Catherine's take on this, and it's just him discussing somewhat of this, and this is Gunther saying, Trump just doubled down on calling for more secure elections, which, by the way, neither Catherine nor I don't think anybody is disagreeing with in an honest sense. Proof of citizenship, voter ID. Now, that's the different part of this. Proof of citizenship is quite different in the ways that they're going with this than voter ID. One-day voting, paper ballots. Now, what's interesting about this is he does discuss paper ballots in this larger point. But if that's the case, then why are we even talking about the digital ID overlap? In the sense of that's what they're pointing to. That's what real ID is. But here's what Catherine says. Nope, you fell for the trap. If you read this, it is an unconstitutional push to sabotage states' rights, which, by the way, that is a clear point, though, in regard to states' rights and their decisions in regard to how certain processes should go. That's the real point of how this country was set up. The federal government has continued to scoop up more and more power. We're seeing that today in this administration more than ever in this history of this country. But that's, again, not what I'm really focusing on today. And it says, and create a federal digital ID system, which is what they're doing. You can see it in everything else they're doing right now, which will be used with digital money. I'll point that out in a second, to turn you and your families into slaves. We do not need federal digital IDs to have free and fair elections. Fine to hold states accountable to do so. Now, this is my point as always. I hope I'm wrong. Consider that I'm wrong. But as always, I think the sense is he really leans into in a lot of conversation points about paper ballots when they really never have as much before. Hey, maybe that's what it will be. I'll support that. The problem, though, is that I think that's being floated on the surface of this because the background is really about something else. She picks up on it too. And it says the notion that we need a federal digital ID is a demonic lie. Only embrace it if you want the mark of the beast system that will make the people who use it to privatize U.S. assets very rich at your expense. Now, here's the actual executive order. I think I had it highlighted, but I'm not going to try to. It's basically what we already discussed. Preserving and protecting the integrity of American elections. I did have a lot highlight on this, but I don't want to try to read through it. It's long. The point was really just to highlight the fact that it is discussing the Real ID compliant identification, citing all the way back to the Real ID Act 2005. What they're doing today is just really trying to reiterate it again through a new act. But, that was one. Yeah, that was one thing I want to show you. So the one thing I thought was interesting is they talk about federal laws prohibiting foreign nationals from voting, which is obvious. That means anybody here who's not on, somebody who's here not illegally, but not a citizen. Same point. I don't see why anybody would argue that should be somebody who's voting. But it does says prohibits foreign nationals from participating in federal, state, or local elections, making any contributions or expenditures. I thought that was really interesting for many reasons. So just to rightly point out here, and it's not just AIPAC, by the way, because, and let's be clear, AIPAC is not an American organization. You can literally look that up in its origins. It's not hard to see. People just lie about it like they lie about everything around Israel today. But just from AIPAC side of it, AIPAC tracker points out, and by the way, it's more than 14. It's now over 16 billion if you account for the other aspects like the 1 billion that was sent right in the beginning, for example. But Trump has approved, they say, over 14 billion in military aid to weapons Israel. But if you roll down, you're going to find that Trump himself, $230 million. J.D. Vance, $167 million. Marco Rubio, over $1 million. This is AIPAC tracker. It goes on and on, all of them. Pretty much every single one of them are either like outrageously pro-Zionist to the point to where it's America second without question, or they're getting straight funding from an Israeli apparatus. But here's and then by the way, let's also not forget Miriam Adelson, an open Israeli oligarch, who is also a U.S. citizen, by the way, who gave him $106 million now, at least on the record, in regard to allowing them to illegally annex the West Bank, which they've already been doing. But the main point to make about any of these is AIPAC or any of the rest, and you can look this up in a lot of different ways. it's important to recognize that these groups basically funnel money from Israeli entities. And this is very public, right? So whether it's AIPAC or any one of these different PACs that exist inside this country, just look up all the different PACs that are funding Donald Trump, or any of them for that matter, and then look into them and recognize they're just a cutout for, and that's why those things exist. So you can have people all over the world with other oligarch and elitist interests who could funnel money through what appears to be an American thing to U.S. politicians. So if let's just say they decide to stop all of that, I will cheer him in that one point very heavily. That's a great thing, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's about pretending that that's the other side doing that. He wrote it down in executive order, but he's still currently taking money from those exact things. So seems to be hollow to me. But back to this point, I'll include the show for you to watch if you want to understand the ins and outs of the act and how it relates to specifically Real ID, but ID 2020 as well. So that was my point on that. So they're rolling this out under the guise of, or rather, let's just say, to be objective, they're talking about voter ID, voter registration, proving identity, and so on, which is obviously interconnected with this larger point. And you can obviously see from a large government perspective, left and right, from multiple administrations, that they're leaning into digital IDs. It's been happening through Trump, through Biden, all of them. So now that they're talking about that, it's hard to believe that it won't go in that direction, especially since they include the Real ID overlap, which, let's be clear again, is about digital ID. I mean, that's why they used the digital services to switch into Doge, because that was about using internet, IT, technological solutions for bettering the country, or how they frame it. So they just took over that. It's the same thing. It's all about AI and digital. That's what this has all been so far, and clearly what their direction is. So then Catherine adds another point to this, which is Trump's moving at high speed to try and end financial freedom by promoting an all digital monetary system. Now, again, that's her opinion. I agree with that. The order is a little bit more nuanced, but the point is this is one more step in that direction. If you've been paying attention, it's one step after another. It's the boiling frog, guys, the totalitarian tiptoe, to point to David Icke. It continues. March 25th. This one says, the continued use of paper-based payments by the federal government, including checks and money orders flowing into and out of the United States General Fund, imposes unnecessary costs, delays, and risks of fraud. Interestingly enough, in the video, he's talking about paper ballots. One of the things he argues is that by using paper ballots, we can save a lot of money. So I think it's funny that in this context, you get the exact opposite argument. By not using the paper, now we can save a lot of money. So how much you want to bet that at some point, very soon in the future, they go from paper ballots to saying, well, we got to save more money, so let's switch that into digital versions. Let's wait and see. But it says, mail theft complaints have increased substantially ever since COVID-19 pandemic. Historically, Department of Treasury checks are 16 more times to be stolen and lost. Now it says that altered than electronic funds transfers. Maintaining the physical infrastructure and specialized technology for digital paper records cost the American taxpayer over $657 million in 2024 alone. This order promotes operational efficiency by mandating the transition to electric payments for all federal disbursements and receipts by digitizing payments to the extent permissible under applicable law. I find this very interesting. He makes a point in parentheses to say, but not, for avoidance of doubt, to establish a central bank digital currency. I just think that's great. It's funny that it's like in the past, that'd be like them saying, but totally not for false flag event, or something that's like they would argue is conspiratorial. It just shows you how much they're definitely paying attention to what people are talking about, and especially his own base. And that's exactly why I think they were always going for a privatized version and not a central bank digital currency, because as Catherine's pointed out, Al Whitney or plenty of others, it's way worse. It's the same problem on steroids. It's, think of total information awareness turning into Palantir. It's the privatization of the government rollout, guys. It's what it is. And so he makes a point to say that. So all of his followers go, see, he said no. Well, we agree. That's not what's happening. It's something worse. But it goes, the Secretary of Treasury shall support agencies transition to digital payment methods. And it just points out digital wallets, other electronic payments. And it says, agencies shall coordinate with the Department of Treasury to facilitate a smooth transition to digital payments. Now, this is one part, guys. You could argue it's just one part, and that's where it'll stop. I hope you're right. All we're pointing out is the incremental steps in that direction, like we've always been telling you is coming. Now, in the AI overlap, which all this connects, this is, every previous of these three things we just showed you, from the digital ID to the digital money they're all incremental steps in the direction of this outcome. And this is the show we did called The Impending Future of AI Government. But who controls the AI? That was March 8th. That we go over this exact discussion. And this goes back to the thing like we knew at the time. They rolled out what was called the GSAI bot, which is an artificial intelligence bot for the General Services Administration, which is insane. We don't know the point is we don't know who's behind all of this. These are privatized aspects. Somebody, by the way, let's recognize that Elon Musk, he's not sworn an oath to the Constitution. He's not been voted in by people of this country. I mean, but not Trump, by the way, also didn't swear on the Bible. I meant he didn't swear an oath, Elon Musk, but neither did Trump. By the way, he didn't put his hand on the Bible. I think is important. I always did from the moment it happened, even though despite him standing right next to it with his wife holding it, I found that weird, especially with all that's going on today. But also the fact that Elon Musk is a person changing more than I've ever seen in ways that in many cases have turned out to be worse, objectively. Is not actually there by anybody. I mean, he doesn't have to, all this. There's no there's no admission of conflicts of interest. There is no ethics pledges. There's no information about who's behind him, driving what. It's insane. And he has more access and influence than anybody right now. So who controls the AI? As they're rolling out programs that have access to your personal data that could potentially change what you may be getting, taking, everything in your life when it comes to government interaction. Especially as we're watching people that all of them seem to continue to support a genocide, in that alone should give you insight into who they are and what they think and what they may do, let alone whether they're giving access to things from other entities. I think these are obviously valid questions. It's the same thing. It's funny. It's the same, and these are not saying that we could prove via X, Y, and Z or China or Russia or Israel, but you know as well as I that when this was Biden in power, these kind of things were floated without any evidence or even anything to go on more than once every day in order to say that he's working for China or he's working for X, Y, and Z. And these same people that would jump at every shadow are refusing to see some of the most obvious things I've ever seen in this field. And that's alarming. Now, this is from February. We've already pointed to a point of this, but I wanted to reiterate it. Elon Musk ally tells staff AI first is the future key government agency. Sources say he's a former Tesla engineer, by the way, is now in charge of the technology transformation services. It's weird how many people seem to be tied back to Elon or people tied back to Peter Thiel. And you really need to ask yourself what the real infrastructure is. In a Monday morning meeting, Thomas Shedd, the recently appointed in February Technology Transformation Services Director and Elon Musk ally, told General Services Administration workers that the agency's new administrator is pursuing an AI-first strategy, which we all know is showing you how alarmingly rapid this is happening in times when we don't even know what's going on. Automating different internal tasks and centralizing data from across the federal government. So more centralization of information flow about you in many ways that absolutely have already been shown to violate your privacy. They don't care. They'll say that again in this article, which we already talked about. That's directly from Schiff himself that says they're prioritizing the direction, even if it violates privacy. Many of Musk's associates have migrated to jobs at higher levels of the GSA. So that's weird to me. So remember, this person has not been elected. He's not sworn an oath of office. He did not do any of these things. And he is putting people in positions that are behind, that come from his background. It says Shedd was a software engineer at Tesla. His particular focus, sources say, was an increased role for AI, not just at GSA, but at agencies government-wide. So if you believe that this is AI just doing, computing what's best for everything, even that needs data input from people that can influence it. But what if it's more than that? You have to understand that, or even less. What if it's just a front for them just inputting what they want you to hear? The point is, we don't know. And it's amazing that this is happening in such a rapid way without any influence from people. Like, even if you want to believe that you actually influence, that you vote in people to act out your collective will. I mean, guys, this is not even, nobody even talked about this before this happened. Were they telling you they're going to use AI to revolutionize the government? No. So it's happening for somebody who hasn't been elected in a rapid way without anybody's influence. I don't know why that's not alarming to everybody. Maybe it is. The development of AI coding agents that would be made available for all agencies. So basically AI bots that are carrying out instruction, and they're doing this for all these agencies. And the problem is we've already seen what these people have done. The Trump administration, Elon Musk, Doge, almost every single direction has been coupled with, firing people, but then rehiring them or deleting the wrong contracts or finding out people were sent to El Salvador who weren't actually criminals or even here illegally, right? Or there's always been, whether it's just meant to be clumsy for an agenda or that they're just being irrational, clumsy in the interest of just fulfilling what they think is a promise met. So my point would be, if you're going to start deploying these things, and we already see that they keep, whether they even do the right thing in some way, they end up chopping off things that don't need to go, or, that has happened almost every time. And that does affect people's lives, particularly around finance tasks that could be automated, it says. Quote, this does raise red flags, said a cybersecurity expert. He said, people, especially people who aren't experts in the subject domain, like these people that are, coming into this field, who might be engineers in other contexts, but haven't worked with the government finance side of things, says coming into projects often, these kind of projects often think this is dumb and then find out how hard the thing really is. Right. So that's you get that kind of hubris. And you've already seen this from these kind of people where they act like they know better and they lop off all these things. And all of a sudden it turns out, well, I guess we did need some of that. Now, it says he suggested that the federal government needs a centralized data repository. Now, that seems like everything else we're hearing, isn't it? For your benefit, to reduce government, we need a bigger centralized government, because that makes sense. Although it wasn't clear where the repository would be based or if these projects would comply with privacy laws. Shed, and we already told you this before, referred to these concerns as a roadblock and said that the agency should still push forward and see what was possible. He said at the time, we're going to go forward anyway, and we'll deal with that when it comes along. So the privacy was an afterthought. That is consistent with everything Trump has said when put to, Second Amendment conversations, whether, guns first, due process later, or what we're literally seeing him do in regard to people's First Amendment rights, or just constitutional rights, or I guess in this case, Fourth and 15th Amendment. So this is clear what they're doing. The direction is obvious. Now, James Corbett put on an excellent show on the 24th of March around something we already referenced. He said this in an interview I caught, and it's stuck with me. Remember, it's called the algocracy, which is basically government through algorithm, or more so, as he says, means rule by algorithm. He says, in this important episode, James Corbett, he says, it's a word that we would do well to become acquainted with. And as you will discover in this presentation, algocracy is being seeded into the public consciousness right now by very same big tech oligarchs who are now in a position to implement their plan for locking down society in an AI-run dystopian surveillance nightmare, otherwise known as the Golden Age. So the point is that these very people who are packed behind Donald Trump are rolling out, or rather what he's pointing out is seeding the idea of why this is what we need. Sort of like Andreessen talking about the elitists and how we need some kind of an oligarch control structure, because that's what they're all drifting you in this direction. Now, this is a story, Ross Story put this out that I thought was interesting. Now, this is, you just take this with a grain of salt, because I think it's obvious that there are political agendas everywhere. I mean, realistically, we all have our biases. That's clear. But within the partisanship, it's just cartoonish today. But why I think this is interesting is because I really consider that this is happening. I've already seen things like this. Not to say that I know their intentions, but I've very clearly seen what you could call mistakes that work in their benefit, for example. But this is arguing that they're creating problems to then point to justify what they want, which in this case is the privatization of this group. Now, that, guys, is like 101 government operation. Problem, reaction, solution. I mean, that's what they do everywhere you look, right? They destabilize an economy, then turn around and say, look, they can't even keep their people fed. We need to swing in and help them. They do it with Iran every other day. So you have to at least consider that's what they're doing here. Quote, creating a fire. Insiders suspect Musk of deliberate sabotage to fuel long-term plan. Now, the obvious point is these insiders are people that from the Social Security agency that he's, upsetting. So you could argue they could have a motivation to lie about him, or maybe just a motivation to tell you the unpopular truth because they're upset. You could decide for yourself, or maybe many other options. So it says insiders at the Social Security Administration are accusing Elon Musk of deliberately sabotaging the agency as the changes he's demanded to protocols have resulted, and this is true, in repeated web page crashes and interminable phone waits, like endless phone waits for beneficiaries. Now, this is one example of what we were just talking about, because this is happening. That arguably what they're doing is causing more problems. Now, maybe because they thought they could fix it a different way, it didn't work out, or maybe this is in the interest of the long-term solving it, who knows? My point, though, is that as they roll these things out, I don't think they're truly taking into consideration the potential issues, because every time it happens, they can blame a Democrat. They can act like it's part of the process. People just seem to go along with whatever the narrative is today in an alarming way. But these people are claiming that what he might be doing is deliberately sabotaging it to justify what they say is going to come next. It says the interviews with Washington Post, current and former SSA employees said they believed Musk and his minions at the Department of Government Efficiency were trying to break Social Security to justify privatizing it. That is an interesting thought. Now, putting aside the partisan discussion, for a lot of the partisan, they probably stopped listening after Washington Post, because that's how blind these people can be. The point is, you should not disregard anything, just like you shouldn't blindly accept anything, but you should be considering all of it. That's what intelligence is. The point, though, is that privatizing it is interesting from an objective, nonpartisan perspective, because that's what always seems to be happening. And it's usually under the guise of some partisan back and forth. Now it says they're creating a fire to require them to come in and put it out. The Post also documents how the changes demanded by Musk have severely degraded the service quality. Now, even if it's not in the interest of privatizing it, they could be just to simply make it look as if it's problematic, which is why they need to be there in the first place, to rationalize their existence. Alarmed lawmakers are straining to answer questions from angry constituents in their districts, it says. Calls have flooded into congressional offices. The AARP announced on Monday that more than 2,000 retirees per week have called the organization since early February, double the usual number, with concerns about whether benefits they paid for during their working careers will continue. It says Senator Angus King echoed SSA insiders' charges that Musk and his minions have been running a campaign of deliberate sabotage against cornerstone social insurance safety net. Their argument being, which is clearly true in some cases, that there's abuse happening. People that are dead still getting payments. But you see, what we've already seen, for example, they go in and start chopping things away. Well, it's already shown that they could be overzealous, if even being accurate at all. And people then get chopped away that didn't deserve to be, and they just kind of brush it away as they're all Democrats. And anybody speaking up gets called a shill or a Democrat. It's crazy. That's not to say that we shouldn't be going after abuse. We see that's how this works, is that they use the excuse of going after that to hide something bigger. Not to say that's what this is for sure, but that is what government does. This is what's going on in the destruction of the agency from the inside out. It is accelerating. What they're doing now is unconscionable. So decide for yourself if you think that's what's happening. What we do know is that there has been issues for people that don't rely on this. And I don't think that's in their concern right now. Now, he points out on the 24th, XAI is the only major AI company with an absolute focus on truth, which is just so funny to me. Truth, especially in the partisan field, which he seems to be a leader of today, is wildly subjective. They all think their truth is the truth, which is just sad. So whether that's the case or not is completely, questionable. But and by the way, I think it's, which we'll show you in a second, actually, based on Grok, is simply not true. We've already proven how clearly what they're doing. They lie to you every day about things, and they're the ones inputting the information. But it goes, rigorous adherence to truth is the only way to build safe AI and the only way to understand the true nature of the universe. While they lie about what they're doing overseas, while they lie about what they're doing with Doge, while they lie about any number of things. Like, get away from the American political field. Lying about what's going on in Venezuela. Getting caught lying about what happened during the election, right? Over and over. These are not debatable. It was on the record. Even the community notes called them out. So if we know they're doing that and refusing to address it and continuing to lie to you, these people are not honest. That's simple. But Chabo says, then why does Grok routinely harvest its assessments from the utterly deluded and grossly inaccurate Wikipedia, which it does, fake news media, and baseless anonymous posts online? Well, guess what? Grok chimes in to answer that question and says Grok, built by XAI, likely uses Wikipedia as a data source per user reports and research, despite Elon Musk's criticism of its accuracy. Now, it says Wikipedia's reliability is debated. 80% accuracy, but prone to bias. I flatly disagree with that. Raising concerns about Grok's truthfulness. That's what it says. XAI aims for factual AI, yet Grok's reliance on such sources sparks controversy. Just even his own system is going, well, I don't know about that. The point is, it's simple, that this is about training you to think what they tell you through these things are the truth versus the other one telling you the other thing. It's basically your technological false binary, your illusion, your two-party illusion with AI. Meanwhile, as we debate about these things, they're using your privacy, your private information, violating the law to train their AI models. This is from from Congress. They're asking for, answers for why they're using Doge, or rather feeding your private data to Doge in order to train their AI program, to unapproved AI systems. That's what we were just telling you before. They're rolling these things out through their 20-somethings team, many of which have weird, things that don't seem to show that in any way that they caring about your privacy, as they've already been caught sharing things behind the scenes about things they see through Tesla cameras. And that's many of the people that are working with him right now, laughing about what you can see on their picture. Guys, these people are the kind of people that would laugh about Democrats and take advantage, or vice versa. And these people are having access to $6 trillion databases and using this to train their AI systems, which are going to be rolled out to control you, it seems. It's terrifying to me, and it's very real. It's very obvious, and very few people seem to care. Now, to roll this into some foreign policy, and by the way, another element of the, one of the pillars behind this rollout, that they're literally training these models in real time on the military side of it in the ongoing genocide with Palantir. Benjamin Netanyahu puts this out today, or rather 12 hours ago. So yeah, today still. It says Israeli democracy is not in danger. The Israeli deep state is in danger. Well, gee, that sure sounds familiar. Isn't that interesting? Now, let's be real, by the way. It's obvious what's happening. I mean, it's unreal. Most of his own people, most of their government, the entirety of it, they've been calling him out as a criminal for decades. And every time it gets close to where something might happen, Gaza war, and things pop off. And then because of the way he set up the broken system, everything has to be put on pause. There is no independent judiciary. That's obvious. That's been pointed out by everybody. And despite your U.S. politicians claiming that's the only reason that we don't have the right to go after them with the ICC and ICJ because of the independent, it's not true. They do not. They have broken the system to a point to where they are, what they're trying to do is roll out this, Zionist-guided, obsessive situation where most people in the country, even though they support it, think what they're doing is alarming. Read Israeli media, guys. It's shockingly obvious. The point, though, is that I think right now he's trying to argue, no, this is not, to be clear, even U.S. media and Israeli media have been talking about the destruction of what they call Israel's democracy. That's why that comes up. But it's not in danger, he says. It's just the bad deep state that's in danger. I simply said, now you see where the U.S. gets its talking points. Or maybe you see it the other way around. The important point is these are wildly corrupt governments, both trying to reconsolidate power by convincing you they are finally stopping the very corruption they're trying to save. That's what this is. It's almost embarrassing to have them roll this out now while that's been what they're pushing here. Like, that's been Trump's thing. Like, the unification of these things is alarming. While Trump has gone, it's the same as Biden. It's just the over-the-top verbal support is different. But they're both blindly supporting, this is a U.S. genocide. You cannot decouple these things anymore. I said it the other day. As Americans, we have to realize our government is not just supporting it, it is committing genocide. And now he wants you to believe that by pointing out any of that, you're part of the deep state. Simple, isn't it? Well, in regard to other distractions, what happened to the Epstein files? I guess we just moved on from that, right? Well, as Kim Iverson points out, to which she's been called a anti-Semitic, racist, Jew hater 75 times in the comments, even though she doesn't even mention that. She's only talking about an Israeli passport. She says, isn't this the Trump who the Trump admin gave the Epstein files to? And here she is flying on March 25th to Israel. See you soon with an Israeli passport. That's all the point is. You can decide for yourself what that might mean. It's not saying Israeli passports are bad or that everybody Israeli is gross. There's no one saying that. In fact, I often say, does not mean every Jewish person, every Israeli. The reality is, it is obvious there could be a problem there when you recognize what they're trying to cover up in those Epstein files and recognize that they seem to handpick a lot of Zionists to roll out what didn't even happen. Yeah, fair point. Or how about the JFK files? Funny, we're just talking about this more than once. As Corey Hughes told you, which seems to be the case, you didn't need anything new to know what already happened. That was the main point. The evidence was there from before, which is, in his opinion, airtight. Israel was responsible. CIA was involved. Now, the new information didn't change any of that. He says everything that we now see in that was already public, if not things that were irrelevant to who actually killed JFK. So what it was, it seems, was pacification, a distraction, burying people in information while they're doing everything else, which is what it's been done, how it's been used every time before this. But even this time, I didn't even get a lot of the, we usually get the, oh my God, this did everything, Trump saved the world. We didn't even really get that. So I'm getting the sense that even a lot of these, maybe in between the team sport politics and conservative side are just kind of like losing their illusion is being shattered, maybe. I hope so, because it seems obvious that this was not what they promised. This is a great clip from Decentralized News. Finally, Sam Husseini gets called on, even in the new administration. He asks a very important question, and the way she responds is so telling. I always forget how it goes. New boss, meet the new boss. Same as the old boss.
That's where we're going to go. And in the back, did I hear JFK? Because interestingly, we haven't brought that up yet, so let's give that a try here. Who is JFK? So who keeps saying JFK?
Excellent, thank you.
In the back? All right, let's do it.
The JFK assassination's obviously back in the news, and Jefferson Morley of JFK Facts was on Bill O'Reilly's show, analyzing some of the documents that the Trump administration has released. One of the revelations that he discussed was the fact that James Angleton, the CIA counterintelligence chief, had relied on Israelis as part of his intelligence gathering operations, which included monitoring Oswald prior to the assassination.
Very quickly, just recognize that he pointed to something that was released in the JFK files. So completely pertaining to JFK file release, just to make that clear, because it's funny how she responds.
It's indisputable that he kept him under surveillance for 4 years, from 1959 to 1963. These new documents point to an Israeli connection using Israeli agent to monitor Oswald.
As you may be aware, JFK in the summer of 1963 was deeply concerned with Israel acquiring nuclear weapons. He had sent a series of letters to Ben-Gurion, Israel's founding prime minister, demanding that Israel allow inspectors. Ben-Gurion resigned just when he was pressed on the issue by JFK.
Something I can say to this.
Yeah, I do.
I do.
I got a question for you.
Right.
Israel continued stalling the inspections, and JFK was, of course, assassinated in November. Every president since has adopted Israel's policy of refusing to acknowledge the existence of Israel's nuclear arsenal. My question to you is, will this administration finally do so?
He's asked that so many times, and they've never responded.
Boy, we went from JFK and then to now Israel's nuclear arsenal.
Yeah, and it was blatantly obvious why it connected, and the fact that she had to do that shows you that she's trying to make it look like that was erroneous. Even though he literally cited, this is the JFK file, this is what was released, and that it's very obvious. You know why she's not, you know why they're responding this way. It's obvious to me.
We went from JFK and then to now Israel's nuclear arsenal.
Will you acknowledge Israel has nuclear weapons?
I understand. Here's what I will tell you about the JFK files.
Wow.
I'm not asking about the JFK
excuse me, sir.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. About 80,000 pages of unredacted records related to the Kennedy assassination are currently being released, and I think they've finished at this point, by order of President Trump. We know that also, as I'd been asked before, if there was any other material anywhere, this is it. This is all the material. It's out, and again, unredacted, and so that's good news. For my generation, this is also good news, sir.
That's not true, by the way. I don't know why they keep saying that. There was a lot that was redacted. Isn't that insane? They just lie like that? It was not. We talked about it on the show. Certainly,
as you grow up with that kind of a dynamic that happened in this country, and now, of course, we happily can say that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is contributing to the nature of our nation and making a difference as well. As far as the speculation and conspiracy theories about what was happening regarding that assassination and in the decades that followed, I have no comment for you, and nor am I going to speculate or comment on that. But I appreciate you being here and asking me that. At the end, yes, sir. Go ahead, please. Thank you. Go ahead.
America first.
Please. Let's keep going.
Thank you, Tammy. On Bangladesh, I have two questions.
God, see, that's where always I point out if you cared, the rest of the journalists in the room should be like, answer the question. Like, that's all it takes, guys, is for everyone in that room to stop being an absolutely passive follower and say, but see, they're access journalists. They know they want the access over the facts. The point should simply be, answer his question. I'll wait. Go ahead. What is the answer? You know what I mean? Like, if everybody did that, then she'd probably walk off and it would make a bigger point. The obvious reality, guys, is this is clear. What they're doing is sidestepping the obvious point because they do not want to address what everybody in the world knows, what even Israel has been forced to admit more than once. So ask yourself why they wouldn't just admit it. There's something with you could argue it's because they're not allowed to or able to. It's actually pretty crazy to me. So she tries to downplay it like conspiracy theory. And she wasn't just pointing to the nuclear aspect. She was talking about the JFK conspiracy theory. And what they put out even also adds to, what they're trying to do is gaslight their own supporters into pretending like only what we want you to talk about is what actually happened and everything else is a lie. Their own supporters aren't following that line. This is desperation. And I think what it has to show people who are being honest with themselves is something else is they're not interested in what you want, what their voters want, or what their supporters want, or what America First is. They just want you to pretend that. That's why they keep giving you the talking points and showing you the direction. Walk right there. Find the courage to call it out. I just can't see. I've never seen something this obvious. Now, overlapping this with Yemen and really the signal discussion, which I just think is just ridiculous today. I wanted to point this out as we roll into what's actually going on in Israel or Gaza as well. But Dave DeCamp points this out. Imagine a foreign country flattening an apartment building in the United States because an American general entered it. Because that's what they're claiming, at least, happened in the chat. Which, by the way, we shouldn't balk at. They do this every day around the world. Israel probably did it 7 times since we started talking today, where they claim a Hamas member was in there, which is what they've been doing in Gaza. They just said that, by the way. In the tents, I'll show you in a minute. There was a Hamas person. As we said from day one, it doesn't matter whether there was it's still a crime. You're still bombing a location in a non-military context because you claim somebody's there, or at the very least, even if they are, you're killing all the innocent people around them. This is not, it's collective punishment. It is not how this works. And so at this point, all you have to do is stand back and think about it in the reverse. If you think that makes sense, then you can argue that any other group that decides to declare U.S. military terrorist organization, which, by the way, if you want to start splitting hairs, it's a hell of a lot more logical to call that group a military or a terrorist organization than arbitrarily naming people who support Palestine terrorists. The point is both of them are broad stroke and ridiculous, but clearly one is responsible for a lot more murder and death. But my point is that you could pretend that by that logic, they can go U.S. terrorist group. Okay. And then now that person has entered that building, we can bomb the whole building. And they bomb a building in Texas and kill a bunch of people. Is that okay with you? If that's not okay with you, then there's logical inconsistency there, obviously. But it says never in a million years would Americans think that was the acceptable and not regarded as terrorism. The problem is the people on partisan sides that want to push back are going to say, but he was a terrorist, and we know that. Yeah, okay. So then you're okay with Israel funding those terrorists to be there, and then they're going to go bomb Israel? No, that one doesn't count. Or the fact that you're taking their word for what is a terrorist, and it's a choice. At the end of the day, we know that's how this works, and we can prove there's a lot of people that they call terrorists who aren't terrorists. So it's the same point. It's a choice to take that line. But he highlights the Signal chat, which was released after the fact, the bigger chat. Just in case you don't, I've already talked about it on other shows. Whatever that was, in some level to me, has to be coordinated. That's my opinion. I mean, it seems silly. I mean, as I said on, I think I was on Homeless Left recently. I don't know if we put it out yet. The point is we were talking about this. In my opinion, is that I don't see how this couldn't be coordinated in some way. And that ultimately, what it usually does is get you debating or arguing about how instead of whether it should be done at all, right? So instead of debating whether or even why are we bombing Yemen right now? Why are we murdering innocent people in civilian locations? Instead of that conversation, we have the debate about how it's done or whether we should be leaking information about wartime situations. Very deliberate, in my opinion. But that doesn't mean that everybody involved was aware of that or even all of it. I don't know. But what I do think is interesting is the points people make is that based on the way they discussed it, it didn't make them look really stupid. Made them look really, so that's hard to think it's not in some way real. But the bigger point is as you get the bigger picture of this, and then don't forget that the Atlantic guy, as I'll point out briefly in the Moon of Alabama article, I'll just show you right here, actually. Where was that? Oh, what? How'd that happen? There it is. Sorry to go back one. So Jeffrey Goldberg dropped out of an Ivy League university in order to volunteer to be an IDF prison guard during the first Intifada, during an ongoing arm of this genocide. murdering innocent people, decided to leave his school to go be an IDF prison guard. That matters, guys. But the point is, that's the guy who supposedly got accidentally included in all of this and then carefully coordinated this release. And what you're going to get from the partisan sides or the corporate media, all of it, is never highlighting that these people seem to be on the same side of things, right? Only arguing that, he's an evil Democrat and he shouldn't be included, or the Republicans. And that's always what they bank. You hope you'll fall into the partisanship. But here, all you're seeing is that they are openly discussing killing people in an apartment building because this guy walked into the building. That's it. Now, this guy says, if you hang with terrorists, bad things could happen to you. Same if you hang with criminals. And he says, if you hang with terrorists, I think it's a translation thing, bad thing can happen to you. This guy's in some kind of Mossad headquarters somewhere. Same if you hang with criminals. So I said, well, you see, most Americans still understand and fight for our inherent rights outlined in the U.S. Constitution. But thank you for at least being honest enough to admit you don't feel the same. Shall not be infringed. Two-party illusion. To which he responded, you're welcome. And I corrected him. I said, you misspelled your, and he just responded, oh, never mind, every time. My point is I'm just being a jerk because the guy's being ridiculous, but the point simply that it's amazing. Now, I think this was probably, let's look, probably a bot out there on this platform. That's not even a hard thing. These days, it's like the flip of a coin. It shouldn't be something we act as to consider whether what you're engaging with a bot right now is a very plausible thing. Not that we should assume that. My point, though, is that there are Americans out there who take this weird line where everything in the Constitution is the most important thing in the world until it becomes our political narrative to basically disregard that. Both sides do this. Whereas right now, it's like, well, he's a terrorist. Well, that doesn't change the constitutional reality, guys. That you're just falling into your statist mindset and going, but they said so. They know better. Well, then apply it logically. All that means is you don't believe in constitutional rights, or you don't acknowledge your inherent rights that have always been there. Well, I'll include this Moon of Alabama article, which basically he makes the argument that like I basically outlined already. That's what I was kind of taking from. The article is entitled, was this quote leak accidental, or is it a pro-war psyop? Now, I think it's kind of both is what he's highlighting, is that ultimately it's being used, but it's hard to think that some of this wasn't in some way real. But I think it's more distraction than anything else. I'll also include from the Ron Paul report where they go over that article and the larger conversation about this, including Yemen, but also what they call Signal Gate. Silly. Good video, though. Now, Mencho just simply posted this saying, during the night, the Yemenis launched, this was yesterday, missile and drones toward the USS Truman. Now, what you note, which I pointed out every time, how many times have you heard that? Have you seen any reports about one of these ships sinking? Have you heard any reports about any American casualties, which, by the way, include injuries too? No, you haven't. Ask yourself how that's even possible. And since they launched a number of drones toward Tel Aviv, and I'm specifically talking about the ship and the USS conversation in the shipping lanes, Mahdi says, how come they never have a direct hit on the aircraft carrier? Manjo Sin says lots of defense layers, which is true, but this is my point. And also because they've deliberately trying to avoid casualties, at least as they've stated. That's what they've said, and clearly there's not been any. I said, we hear a lot about deterrence from the West as they bomb civilian locations and kill people. Well, this is what it actually looks like. It's all about stopping the genocide, right? So they've been telling you, we're not trying to go after anybody than people that are supporting the genocide. That's why other ships aren't affected. That's been clear. They don't want to point that out because it makes them look like they're liars, because they are. But on top of that, that they have been continually doing this to stop, to deter, to avoid, to turn them back, not to attack them, which is what the U.S. and Israel do without batting an eye. They'll bomb an entire hospital, take down an entire building or a car full of people because, like we just saw, because one of these guys walked in. You need to recognize the difference here, as they're literally calling these people pirates and terrorists for standing up for what's right in the world, in this context anyway. Not to say good guy, bad guy. In this context, they've consistently shown you they're doing this, and even when it comes to the agreements, when they suddenly have a ceasefire where they might see an end to it, they stop doing it. You just can't, there's no air in it. You can see what's happening. And antiwar.com, full signal chat reveals U.S. officials celebrated bombing a residential building in Yemen, because they did. So that's one of the reasons why I find it hard to believe that they would put that out there, because it makes them look like the monsters they are, but who knows? Now, here's why I put this out today because I thought it was funny, but it's also because it's true. Secretary Rubio on the 24th said the United States will not tolerate any third countries, which I don't know what I think they would third. I mean, it's funny they would. I didn't think about that. Third countries or their oil companies producing, extracting, or exporting oil and oil-related products with Maduro. I think maybe they mean like through a third part. I don't know, like third world country maybe, which you're not supposed to say anymore. You know, whatever. Like not in the sense that's like a woke thing, but because it doesn't even apply. Like the logic around that was some kind of manipulated thing from a long time ago. And arguably, I made that point before that if you look at what the metrics were for what they call a third world country, the U.S. government, America has met those metrics for a very long time. It's not necessarily about how it looks on the presentation, right? Different conversation, but it's worth looking into. The wealth gap, the prison system. I mean, everything they use, it's pretty much what's happening in this country. But anyway, the point is, I already made this point about how they're going to go after Venezuela and why. Why all of a sudden, right after this gang conversation, that they all of a sudden started lobbing these things at Venezuela. There's a bigger conversation here. Ask yourself why any other country has the legal right, they don't, by the way, to stand up and say, nobody in the world can deal with Venezuela. Otherwise, we're coming after you. He says, this is a regime that has consistently stolen elections, which, by the way, everybody else in the world seems to disagree with that. Maybe they have. It wouldn't surprise me. But every time they make the claim, the vast majority, pretty much every election observer, hundreds of them, both from left and right governments, even from governments that support the United States, continued, even U.S. entities. One case, it was Carter a while back, said they had a completely on the up and up election. And they don't like the outcome, so the U.S. cries foul like they do everywhere, like in Bolivia, where they said, oh, they stole it, and then put in a military control structure, and then nobody no, that was okay. Democracy, right? It's just insanely obvious, guys. They don't want this. That's why they don't care about elections in Haiti, because they have control of what they want there. They don't care. These are liars. It's more provable than anything we could talk about. So for him to make that point is embarrassing, especially since they point at the other side. So let's even take this nonpartisan. Aren't they telling you the Democrats steal elections? So what are we talking about? Don't the Democrats tell you Republicans do the same? It's just so ridiculous. But he goes, pillaged from its people. My God, if you want to see a country that pillages from its people, look at every system in this country. But realize that happens in every government, including in Venezuela. And it says, and colluded with our enemies. So basically all that means is they work with people we don't want them to work with, which is not your right to tell them who they can work with. So you're a dictator. You're authoritarian. You are a pirate. Any country that allows its companies to produce, extract, or export from Venezuela will be subject to new tariffs. There's your economic warfare, guys. And any companies will be subject to sanctions. So you're going to sanction into private companies and put tariffs on goods because they dare to work with a country that you don't like? Yes, guys, these are authoritarian monsters. Now, here's the point. As a joke, really, but it's exactly the case. I said, Rubio is showing you how pirates actually look every day he serves in office. How they want you to think pirates look, a pirate or a Houthi rebel, how they actually look. And there you go, left and right and middle. You got Trump and Biden and Rubio, and I could have put Netanyahu, I could have put any number of people there. That's the reality. These are the pirates of the world, guys. They're literally dictating what you're allowed to do with other countries. They're stealing from people they don't like. They're bombing and killing innocent people because you're not. I mean, it's just a perfect embodiment of what we understand to be the villain in the conversation. Now, and then just to add this somewhere, because I want to point it out, we recently mentioned this. I found this incredible. So we keep telling you that they're hyping up the Iran nuclear weapons like they always do, despite every single time, even U.S. intelligence, like we're going to show you again, or the State Department or the International Atomic Energy Agency, they are not seeking a nuclear weapon. That's not to say that they aren't secretly somewhere we can't see. The point is the evidence does not show that. And that's not that Israel knows the evidence we don't see. No, they keep trying to pretend there's evidence, then they show you that fake evidence, and that gets shown to be false over and over and over. So if there was real evidence that they had access to, why would they keep getting caught lying about it? Just to be objective, though, who knows what's going on? And arguably, I could say that there's a reason they would do so today. But they've continued to say that they have not done so because their religion restricts that. But U.S. intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, says Iran is, quote, not building a nuclear weapon. U.S. intelligence agencies have reaffirmed for the umpteenth time that there's no evidence that Iran is developing nuclear weapons or that Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has reversed his 2003 fatwa, meaning it's not allowed, that banned the production of weapons of mass destruction. That's not just nuclear, by the way. And it says the IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. And Supreme Leader Khomeini has, like we just said, not changed that direction. Gabbard's comments were based on the annual threat assessment, which we talked about recently, which is released by the ODNI with input from all U.S. intelligence agencies. The report did note that there have been more calls inside Iran to reverse that, which you could look it up. That's like Lindsey Graham saying something. It doesn't mean that anything's actually changing, which have grown in response to Israeli aggression. That's my point. There's logical reasons why people around are going, we need to change that. This is what they mean. Look what happened in North Korea. They started doing nuclear weapons and they stopped bothering them. It's like you can see the logic there. Nonetheless, even Tulsi Gabbard is telling you that's not what's going on. And Trump is out there with Vance and the rest of them telling you that we need to go after their nuclear weapons. It's kind of crazy what's happening today. Now, let's talk about Israel. Now, this video is harsh. I'm only going to show it with no video, no audio. I don't think it's important these days to show you all the graphic content. I think we all know well what's going on over there. But I wanted to make sure you saw what's going on. That this is today, guys, nonstop. Every single day this is happening. Every single moment in Gaza, people are being blown apart, being starved, being tortured. It's constant. That's why this is such a difficult thing to keep covering. And the reality being that they don't seem to care. Well, rather, we know they don't care. And then frustratingly, how it's possible, everyone can see this and most want it to stop and they don't do anything. Francesca Albanese says, I force myself to repeat it again and again. The destruction of a group as such, of a people as such, a genocide, can unfold in many horrific forms through crematoria, machetes, bombs, and more, as in a reference to multiple genocides, right? Holocaust, Rwanda being something Israel was involved in, easy to look up before, during, and after, armed them with the machetes and with everything else. It is not the method of destruction, she says. It is the intent to destroy, annihilate a targeted group. That's the point about whether the numbers don't even necessarily have to be the case. It's just about the intent, truly. Israel has so far chosen bombs, starvation, torture, and I'll add rape, and many other methods. Question is, when are we going to stop it? Now, this is graphic, so just be aware of that if you want to look away. If you noticed, these are all people that were praying. There's seats, there's rugs out. I mean, these are people that were not partaking. They bombed a bunch of innocent people. It never stops. This is deliberate torture and suffering. This is meant to hurt and punish these people for existing. I mean, I don't know how else you can frame that. I mean, that's obviously how I interpret this, but how do you explain why this government can continually murder people who are objectively who are just standing, praying, collecting where they're told to go? Like, it just never stops. Collecting around a truck to get food that was supposed to be delivered. Here is Sarah Wilkinson. Israelis are using extremely destructive, high-powered weapons after footage of them striking a civilian family home in Jabalia in Gaza reveals. We saw one I'll show you in a second of the tents. That was a couple days ago. You can see these right here, guys. I mean, you could see what these, first of all, what's happening in Gaza, right? It is gone. There's remnants of destroyed buildings. People are trying to help, find places to exist, but they're bombing people who are already destroyed. So ask yourself why they need this kind of munition, and realize there's no narrative. They're not going, we went after Hamas. Unless it gets international discussion, they don't even care to give an excuse. You could see the kind of bombs where you could see it right there. By the way, that's the kind of stuff they're getting from the United States. Bombing this building with very high explosive, and it's killing everybody in the building or everybody around the building. And that's the point. And these are areas where people are told to go. For example, the tents in the area they're told to go to get away from the bombing, which they're doing again, by the way. Leaflets and go here, go there, and they bomb all the places at the same time. Not new. You already know this. It's very easy to prove. Here's the tents that they bombed. Why would they need to use something that big to go after a tent? Because that's what they claimed. They killed everybody in that area. Every time. The moment Israeli occupation warplanes bombed a refugee tent camp in Gaza with American-made missiles. Has there ever been such savagery in history, he says. This is the chairman of the Euromed Human Rights Group. Sadly, this one's hard. I mean, you can listen to it if you'd like to. 19-year-old young man from Bet Hanun documented his last moments of his family before they were all killed by Israeli bombs. Says, I can't, my back is broken. Children crying in the background. And they died. These entire areas are getting bombed. These people were buried in their homes, and then they bombed again. That's how this works. Now, here are some doctors that I don't want you to miss this, because it is I mean, realistically, if I've been only focusing on this was probably thousands of doctors. But every time I see a doctor that speaks out about this, I try to add it to it. And this is the ongoing thread that I've put together of it's like 50 doctors now, 40 something doctors, each one of them telling you the same thing in some way. Israel's killing children. Israel's assassinating doctors. Israel's torturing and raping. Oh, and like firsthand witnessing. What more do we need, guys? Here's an example. This is Mark Perlmutter, MD. Here's the actual tweet. Last night in Gaza, we operated on a 15-year-old girl who was riding her bike when she was shredded by an Apache helicopter. Who knows? Maybe U.S., maybe Israel. She will be lucky if she keeps 2 of her limbs after 12 hours of collective surgery. And look, this person with a Israeli, whatever those are called, for October 7th says lies. It's disgusting. With 358 likes, people are disgusting. And I said the ongoing U.S.-Israeli genocide in Gaza. So here, let's look at what she wants you to think are lies, shall we? Here are some doctors we pointed to before. Now, I think this was, I forgot I was going to look up his name. I forgot. It's, I'll find it as we're going through. It's these two right here, in fact. 2 of the very first doctors that I highlighted on this thread. Here they are speaking because for 2 reasons, to show you that it's continued, but also that they tried to kill them. They literally, that's this clip here. CNN interviewed them hours after Israel tried to kill them by bombing the hospital they were in. First, is the clip they put out. And this was put out by, it's right here. Abir. She said, she's just quoting what they say. Oh, here, Dr. Mark Perlmutter is one of them. Here's the clip.
Orthopedic surgeon colleague here who was taken out of the operating room. His fingers were crushed. They showed him a picture of his wife from a spy, not from a magazine or an old photo, and it had a metadata and said it was taken the day before, up close, and said, we're going to bring her here in front of you, and we're going to gang rape her in front of you if you don't admit that you're Hamas, or we'll keep breaking your fingers. So in case you don't hear that, they're coercing doctors to admit they're Hamas, or they're going to rape their wife or break their fingers, or already have. And this is the groundbreak, the Hamas members that we're killing. He still didn't admit he was Hamas, and they said, well, then we're going to send a drone through your bedroom window and incinerate your children, and he still wouldn't admit he was Hamas. They beat him every time he asked to speak to a lawyer, and beat him twice as hard after he spoke to his lawyer. My God. And he spent 11 months in prison, having probes inserted up his rectum by female IDS members who said that the probe was soaked in pork blood. Doesn't that sound familiar? Remember how we showed the Azov movement dipping their bullets in pork fat because they were fighting Muslims? Right? There's a reason there's consistency here, guys. It's not hard to recognize. This is obviously coming through. I mean, you could make it about Israel. You can make it about Ukraine. You can make it about the United States. You decide for yourself. I think it's obvious what's driving the bus. My point is the consistency, the racial hatred, the bigotry, the unbridled hatred for people that are simply different than them. It's just not hard to see. And now you can, as he's telling you, raping these people with
rectal devices dipped in pork blood. I mean, have you ever heard something like that? It's quite clear that there's something wrong here and that your government, whatever it is supporting it. Now, here's another clip. This one put out by APAC Tracker, same two people.
Well, first of all, there's never been a ceasefire, and there's never been a ceasefire since 1948. That's just part of the propaganda line that the Western media has been feeding us because you're being fed that.
So again, this is the doctor speaking to CNN saying, what do you mean ceasefire? There's no ceasefire. They bombed every single day because they have. It's obvious, and people on the ground know that. And these ridiculous so-called media platforms just repeat it's just, at least they have them on, but my God, they just narrative, and then everyone calls them Hamas supporters. It's painful. Imagine being them and watching this happen, trying to help people, and then getting called a racist terrorist for even trying to help children that are being starved to death.
The carnage induced by our last 5 presidents are largely Republican legislature and previous legislatures, and the whitewashing performed by the American and Western European legacy media is directly responsible for 100% of the 100,000 kids that are acknowledged to be dead or which have yet to be found because they're buried under the rubble. And if the media cannot acknowledge, for example, that 1948 even happened, and educate their viewership about the sequela of that, then you're not going to either investigate or report on the babies that were buried alive in the mass grave that's not even 100 yards from me.
Just try to put yourself in their position. Think about that. Having to verify, that you're watching it. You could literally send them video. You have doctors around you. The amount of evidence that, even other Israelis, even IDF members who have admitted these things, and you still have to debate this. So do you condemn Hamas? Stuff like that. It's obscene. Now I'll actually play that first, since I mentioned it, and then I want to play that other clip again because I think it's a good moment to play that. But this is the one just about the I thought I saw that in here. Yeah, right here.
Do you think that you witnessed war crimes taking place?
Probably. The ground assumption is that they are Hamas. And then if you go this way, you're bound to kill people that are not.
Now, in a rare interview, one soldier tells us about the reality he says he witnessed. What kind of stuff would they say?
There are no uninvolved, only unarmed. This is something that I'm going to carry for the rest of my life.
Now, let's play a couple of these other doctors, just in case those haven't seen them, because they're powerful and important to hear. Now, I want to reiterate, guys, that the list is incredibly long. I mean, these are just the ones. I mean, actually, I forgot to play this one too, and then I'll play the other ones. Actually, I take it back. I've got a few of them I want to play. It's important for you guys to hear these, though. It's not some one-off situation. I mean, I don't. Every doctor that I've heard of that comes back from Gaza has the same story, and all we want to listen to is a bunch of radically extreme politicians who have an obvious agenda, one way or the other.
Dr. Morgan McMonigal in Nasser Hospital, Khan Yunis, Palestine.
Sorry, it seems kind of low for some reason. I won't jump in if you want to turn up your volume.
Sent us this message on Tuesday, 25th of March, 2025. We were up all night last night, operating on those injured by the latest bombings. During the night, 2 children, approximately aged 5, were pronounced dead on arrival. We had one 10-year-old boy who was hit by a severe blast. He suffered a head injury, abdominal injury, and severe orthopedic and vascular injuries to his lower limbs. Another injury was a 12-year-old girl with multiple gunshot wounds, inflicted by shots fired at her from an Israeli Apache helicopter. We worked on her until 3 a.m. She will most likely lose both legs and an arm. Her parents' status is unknown. They were trying to run from the helicopter.
The Israeli government has killed 200 children in less than a day. It has killed 18,000 children up to now. What kind of a world do we live in where they can get away with this? When I was in Gaza twice last year, I saw mostly children. They would come in either dead or critically injured. They bomb hospitals and kill journalists with complete impunity. These are war crimes. When these crimes are brought to their attention, the Israeli government engages in toxic deflection. The United States government is directly responsible for these war crimes as well. Both the United States government and the Israeli government engage in blame shifting, denying the truth, and gaslighting the whole world. I will not be silent, and I will not be scared into being silent. If you have been silent up to now, please check your moral compass. War crimes are being committed with our tax dollars. How long will you allow this to happen? How long will you be silent? Wake up.
Of the few Australians in Gaza at the moment, what would you like Australian audiences to know?
I would like them to know that there are Israeli hostages here, but there are also 2 million hostages from Gaza here who have been cut off from food, water, and electricity, and right now are being carpet bombed. We need a humanitarian intervention from our government. We need Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong to listen to the millions of people demonstrating in Australia and all around the world. We need to get medical equipment in here. Can you hear that?
I didn't hear that.
That's the bombs going off right now. It's pretty close by, but this has been going on relentlessly all night. And we have had trickles in of patients coming in, and we're expecting a surge of patients to come in because the bombs over the last 30 minutes have just increased. I need my...
Every single part of the hospital has been destroyed. The whole infrastructure of the hospital has been destroyed. When I spoke to Marwan yesterday, he told me there were 107 patients still in the hospital, 60 medical staff. God only knows what has happened to them. I think we've seen some of the pictures. Surgeons I know have been executed in the last 48 hours there. Bodies have been discovered in the last 12 to 24 hours who have been handcuffed, with their arms behind their back. And so there is no doubt at all that multiple healthcare workers have been executed there in the last few days.
You believe executed by whom, Doctor?
By the Israeli Defense Force.
Why would they seek to execute surgeons and medical professionals?
Well, they've been doing it since October the 7th. Over 450 healthcare workers have been killed. Friends of mine that I have worked with over the years. Many have been abducted as well, and nothing has been heard of them since. So there is no doubt in my mind, and I can bear witness from this from my time at Al-Aqsa Hospital and from talking to people, that there's been direct targeting of the healthcare system in Gaza, direct targeting of hospitals, and multiple killings of healthcare workers.
Any death is tragic, but this is not, and I say again, anyone dying in any sense. So this is not, and please don't be upset by this expression, collateral damage. This is specifically targeted, you're saying, medical professionals by the IDF to be taken off and executed, is your belief?
Most certainly, that is my belief.
Have you at any time seen anything that would lead you to believe that there had been terrorists who were hiding in the hospital?
Without exception, every single one has responded to say they have never witnessed any Hamas militant in the hospitals they have worked in.
When were you in Gaza?
End of April for the first couple of weeks. And then there's sniper bullets. I have children that were shot twice.
Wait, you're saying that children in Gaza are being shot by snipers?
Definitively. I have 2 children that I have photographs of that were shot so perfectly in the chest I couldn't put my stethoscope over their heart more accurately, and directly on the side of the head. In the same child. No toddler gets shot twice by mistake by the world's best sniper. And they're dead center shots.
In fact, more than 20 doctors recently in Gaza also told Sunday Morning about gunshot wounds to children. One American doctor told us he even reviewed CT scans to confirm what he saw because he, quote, didn't believe that this many children could be admitted to a single hospital with gunshot wounds to the head. Some shootings have been captured on video.
So, of all the disaster zones you've seen, how does Gaza compare?
All of the disasters I've seen combined, 40 mission trips, 30 years, ground zero, earthquakes, all of that combined doesn't equal the level of carnage that I saw against civilians in just my first week in Gaza.
And when you say civilians, is it mostly children?
Almost exclusively children. I've never seen that before. Never seen that. I've seen more incinerated children than I've ever seen in my entire life combined. I've seen more shredded children in just the first week.
Shredded?
Shredded.
What do you mean?
Missing body parts, being crushed by buildings, the greatest majority, or bomb explosions, the next greatest majority. We've taken shrapnel as big as my thumb out of 8-year-olds.
The UN reports that to date, more than 80% of Gaza's population has been displaced and the majority of its buildings destroyed. A reality which has taken its own toll on the well-being of children.
So here is a thread, as I showed you, with a lot. All of them saying something in the similar vein. And some of them are really hard to watch. Like this one in particular, this guy, this very stoic man just breaks down. Like somebody you could never, you start watching this, you do not expect this person to start trembling because he's seen dead children. You know what I mean? And it just, I don't know how we can ignore this, but some people are. Get it out there. Now, on one note that relates to this, you might have seen a lot of, this is how this tends to work. More than ever, this is breaking through. So all of a sudden, you got these reports about how Gazans are protesting against Hamas, which is certainly possible. Like, let's be clear, like anywhere else, not everybody everywhere supports what they argue is the power structure, especially since a lot of Gazans are very aware of Israel's influence. Nonetheless, there's only a few groups that are there if they want to push back. My point is that all of a sudden, you've got this sort of like false presentation. And as Alan McLeod shows, after years of ignoring major, like almost entirety of Palestinian protests, the BBC has finally found one it wants to report on. Hundreds joined Gaza's largest anti-Hamas protest since the war began. It's just so grossly dishonest. And Alan then went further, dug into the background of the BBC's Middle East editor, and guess what? Surprise, surprise. He's an ex-CIA employee and a Mossad collaborator who keeps a signed letter of praise from Benjamin Netanyahu on his office wall. But I'm sure that plays no factor on his reporting about Israel and Netanyahu's what he's doing. It's just disgusting. And on that, and again, on that same note, Dan Cohen was just highlighting one of these same kind of these characters out there that is reporting as if he's like, I'm a Gaza Palestinian and this is what I think. Don't ignore his opinion, but consider what Dan is saying. His name is Khalil Saig, or how do you pronounce the last name? Says, who implies that Hamas is not a resistance movement. Now, here's the point on that first. Regardless of whether 80% of it is influenced by Israel, or all of it for that matter. That's the point about what that means. Anything inside the occupied territory that decided to fight back against the occupier against, like we talked about, occupied force fighting against the occupier. Simple, not random civilians. Anybody doing that, though, fighting against the occupier, is a legally protected act as armed resistance under the Fourth Geneva Convention. It's international law, guys. Simple. So you can't pretend it's not a resistance movement, even if you think it's entirely controlled by Israel. It's simple. It's very clear. And it says, is an Arab, that you implies Hamas is not a resistance movement, is an Arab Zionist, that's who this person is, who appears at events in collaboration with AIPAC. Stand With Us, funded by Netanyahu's office and the ADL. Obvious what side they stand on. And it says his colleague at the Philos Project is former Bush administration official Dan Seener. Seener recently gave a softball interview to Yoav Gallant, and the architect of the Gaza genocide, declared Palestinians to be human animals before mass murdering them. Two of these human animals, they put it, were his father and younger sister, in fact, who died as a result of the siege of Gallant order. Hamas is not flawless, and the people of Gaza should be able to criticize and protest against it as they see fit. But this person, this Palestine supporting Zionist, apparently, is a collaborator of the very forces that are carrying out the genocide of his people that Hamas is resisting. Interesting how this works, guys. There's multi-layers. The point is that we're constantly, because everybody sees it, whatever the inner working context, they're committing genocide. The world sees it. So this is the kind of stuff that's meant to throw in stick in the spokes, to get you distracted from the ongoing decimation of children to focus on some nuance they want you to think about. They consider it. Don't ignore it, but recognize regardless of that, the genocide is carrying on. Now, as the overlap to this, one of the most disconcerting parts of this as it comes back to the United States is how even as that's happening and as everyone seems to see it, that very group that is primarily committing genocide is simultaneously convincing our government to get rid or to completely disregard our constitutional rights. How in the world that's even possible is beyond me when we all see what's happening. And let's not forget, again, for the 100th time, even illegal aliens have constitutional rights. I mean, I've gone over this more times than I can count. It's easy to look up, and I'll just do this again and reference specifically Reno versus Flores, where Justice Scalia, Republican, very clearly ruled the Fifth Amendment entitles aliens to due process in deportation. And he makes the case in the article, in particular, in deportation proceedings. We're talking about illegal aliens, guys, not even, especially green card holders or visa holders. But you know where this conversation goes. This is for people that haven't seen this already. The reality is that's being disregarded for obvious political reasons. I think transparently in Israel's interest at the expense of American interests. And then using something that many of you have been kind of propagandized to hate, whether you agree with it or not, but propagandized to hate irrationally anyone here as an immigrant, let alone illegally. So this is how this works. And now they're getting you to undermine your own inherent rights. But this is where it starts. All right, so that's why I put this show out called U.S. Government's Flagrant Attack on Free Speech. Mohammed Khalil was just the beginning. So you can read this if you want to look further into the reality of your inherent rights and how that applies specifically to green card holders, illegal aliens, anybody. That's the point that you've got to look further. The Fifth Amendment, 14th Amendment, it says any person. It applies to anybody, guys. That's the fact that it even gets pushed back on by people claiming to support the Constitution is what's so alarming. But then, of course, we followed up with a few shows after that. The March 14th show, the demolition of free speech is underway as partisan grifters and sycophants cheer on their own demise. On the 16th, U.S. government continues Israel's illegal war on Yemen, and Trump doubles down on free speech attack. This is the evolution of it. We're going from Khalil. We start talking about the Venezuelan gang conversation. This one is JFK distraction, U.S. war on Yemen, Gaza genocide continues, and U.S. government war on American rights. And this is one of the last ones we discussed, and this is where it got especially dark, because this is where we start to hear the possibility of American citizens being sent to El Salvador, because even if you want to claim they're committing terrorist acts, that is still that's still terrifying and unconstitutional. Crimes do not then remove your rights, guys. Whether they're terrorist acts they deem terrorist or not, that's the point, is they just call whatever they want, as you're seeing right now, terrorist acts. People scratching Tesla cars, vandalism, terrorist acts. Even though, yes, there has been very extreme versions of, but which without undeniably federal crimes, bombing a building, bombing a car. Yes, that they should go to prison for those things. But it's not terrorism. Even on a coordinated event, the bottom line is, guys, they're turning this into, because we deem it terrorism, that we can put it American wherever we want. Well, let's realize that would include due process. That would include the presentation of evidence, all of which they've denied all of these other people who have those rights as well. This was called Trump could send Americans to El Salvador, and Israel commits the largest child massacre in its history. Now, I'm not going to play this here. I'll play it in a second, but I want to include this so it sets the tone in your mind. In case you haven't heard it, we'll play it again in a second. Where Trump, for those that try to deny, which is still happening out there on the Twitterverse, that this was even what he said or that he didn't really mean it, you can listen for yourself. Trump floats sending American citizens to El Salvadorian prisons. This is an attack on all. Damn it. I don't know how I do. As always, I kind of feel like these things happen after I post them, but I'm crazy. This is an attack on all you believe. Oh, no, it is right. I was making sure. I thought I wrote that wrong. This is an attack. The reason I say that, by the way, not that I never want to assume. I could always make a mistake. Is that I read these like 4 times over. I read constantly, and then I read it again after I post it. So when I look back later and it's like a typo, I'm like, how in the world? I'm an editor. I read these things over. Anyway, I'm not saying I know for sure. We know there's weird stuff happening today. Anyway, it says this is an attack on all you believe you're fighting for under a thin veneer of, quote, fighting Democrats. It really is, guys. I mean, it's they're even if everything they're saying is accurate, which is not, it is still obviously the wrong thing. You are going after people who have constitutional rights. You're not giving them due process, and you're using that to then within days, suggest that Americans are next. I said there are already laws in place to hold these people accountable. So to create using some, I mean, you know where we're going. We'll come back to this. This is terrifying. So I want to use this video just because I thought it was just insane to me. This is what we get today. Now, look, in one way, I'm glad there's a lot of new people, new and old, just, putting content out there. I like that. I think it's good. The more information, well, I mean, you could argue that I think intentionally so the field gets kind of watered down on purpose, but you know what? I think the choice is better than none, right? My point, though, is that you get this kind of response to this stuff, which gets most of the reach. If it taps in to your partisan biases, whether or not it's even factual, this is pretty sad. Now, this person shares this saying, are there any alternative explanations beyond simply assuming they hate America? In regard to the judge who dared to, well, you'll see how it goes. This is the guy we're talking about. And obviously, I think he's like all of them. Everyone in that clip has political motivations. But what he's doing in regard to the Venezuelan deportations is accurate. It's correct. I'll show you what I mean. But it says, what other possibilities can we consider to make the sense of the situation? My mind is blank. And she's basing it off what this guy says, which is, cartoonishly false based on what they're claiming, not what the facts are. That's not even my opinion. You'll see what I mean.
Straight. A federal judge is blocking Trump's decision of sending back gang members to the country of their origin.
Okay, first sentence, right out of the gate. Well, it seems that most of them, well, let's be clear, first point, none of them have had due process. None of them have evidence produced to prove the claim they're a gang member. None of them. Secondarily, it's already been shown that some of them, if not most of them, are not. That's according to Venezuela, which of course they could be lying. That's according to their family members, which of course could be lying. That's according to basically everybody other than the Trump administration. Some of them have been proven to not be. Secondarily, to the country of their origin. Now think about how embarrassing this is, or if this person even cares, to be so bombastically wrong. Let's realize that, first of all, these were mostly Venezuelans and none of them went to Venezuela, okay? I don't believe any of them are actual El Salvadorian. I don't think so, because the point is it's so opaque, we don't even know the full picture. The vast majority were Venezuelan. I think there was Hondurans. But to say that they went to the country of origin just shows you that he doesn't know what he's talking about. And on top of that, taking it at face value that they're all gang members. So far with one sentence in, we've completely taken at face value the government narrative for the government action. That they got rid of gang members and sent them back where they belong. Well, no, all of that seems to be fake. At the very least, we don't know the first part of it. The second part is entirely false.
So there are gang members who are here illegally.
Nope. Some of them, yes. Most of them, the gang member thing is up in the air. I can now prove to you at least one of them. I think there was, well, I'll get into some of the other cases after this, but the one that's important was a person who was legally in this country. He had already been given asylum. There were multiple people, which is why I balked for a second there, who were in the process of doing that. So yeah, they're all illegal, just sweeps it all away. No, that's not the truth. And on top of that, even if they were, they still have the right to due process, which none of them were given.
They're not even supposed to be here. Yeah, so Trump says, let's get rid of those guys. Let's send them back to where they once came.
Nope. Again, incorrect.
And then a judge basically looks to stop that from happening.
Yeah, and see, that sounds so ridiculous when you frame it that way. Now, the reality is the judge simply said, don't turn the plane around because these people deserve rights. They deserve due process. There deserves to be evidence presented to prove that they're actually gang members, seeing as how it's clear that some of them are not. And almost all of them did not have any criminal record. That's been admitted by Trump's administration. So yes, being here illegally is a crime. But is it a crime enough to send them to a concentration camp in a despotic authoritarian country right now run by a Zionist who literally is putting them to hard labor? especially since many of them were literally fleeing from bad situations in countries that the U.S. was destroying. Like, all of this matters, but none of it actually matters when it comes down to the core point, which is that they have rights regardless, and it was not respected. But you see, if you leave all of that out and just go, gang members weren't sent back and the judge wants to stop it, that's crazy. Yeah, and that's what people watch and then act like is the full picture, and that's how the partisan field works.
An American judge whose job it is to uphold the American law. Okay.
No, the Constitution, in fact, not the law, because there's plenty of laws that are repugnant to the Constitution, which make them null and void. A judge's job is to uphold the Constitution, which is what he's doing. Not even to say that's what he's always done or that he's always doing his job. But in this case, it is the reality, guys. I mean, I can even guarantee you there's some political motivation for why he happens to be doing what I can prove to you is the right thing. That doesn't change the fact that it is, in fact, the right thing. That's just, it's so incredibly frustrating.
Maybe somebody out there can help me with this one just to
I'm trying, bud.
Make it make sense.
I'm trying.
I'm going to run through this one more time. Federal judge in America, American judge, supposed to be upholding American laws, is blocking Trump's decision to send back the criminals who have already committed the crime of being here illegally, but are also committing other heinous crimes.
Nope. See how easy that is to just conflate all of the statements that Trump makes without any factual background, or pretending to be a journalist that doesn't actually vet any of the things you're saying out loud, but doing so with disdain and outrage because that makes it sound like you know what you're talking about. I mean, realize, guys, there are people that are criminals that should have been charged with crimes, but realize we already had laws to deal with all of that. And on top of that, that the people that you are claiming are heinous crimes, well, we could actually know the reality if they had even cared to present the evidence for the crimes they supposedly committed. Imagine being an American in America who doesn't care about the upholding of constitutional rights when it suits your political interests. Exhibit A.
Yeah, those guys. So Trump is looking to send them back. The judge is looking to block them.
I mean, this is just so obnoxious. You're just repeating the same sentence you said in the beginning 3 or 4 times in a row with more accentuation because you're just so, I can't figure it out. Well, clearly you can't figure it out. Clearly you don't know what you're talking about. And it's not about being outraged about a judge politically stopping something that should be happening. I can give you 100 examples of that. This is not that. And that's what's so disgusting is that the partisanship has been trained like barking seals to jump at whatever they're supposed to jump at. It doesn't matter what you can prove. I am suddenly a lefty supporting a extreme judge because that's the narrative. It doesn't matter whether he's a lefty extreme judge. It doesn't matter whether he's actually doing the right thing. It doesn't matter. Because that's what the case is, because you're supposed to, because that's what the orders were, push back on this because that's what we were told. And it's funny, I was thinking about this before we got started. How often we point this out? Just a second ago, I felt like we were being called out by the left, right? Now, all of a sudden, it's oscillated around, and I'm still in the same position, and now all of a sudden, it feels like the right's going, you're now a lefty, and it just never stops. It's like moment to moment, it seems to change around us. He's working it out.
I must be missing something.
Oh yeah, you're missing something. That's for sure. Now, I don't know who this person is or where this came from because this other person's the one that posted it. But get in front of him, show him, because I don't think it matters, quite frankly. But you guys, this is what has saturated the field. Just subjective, assumptive, not fact-based Twitter file stuff. It's insane. Now, I recommend you go over the rest of the stuff to understand the reality. I mean, I already gave you enough tools to understand the basic reality. Whatever the narrative is, these people were not given their rights, their due process. That alone should outrage any American that cares about anything the Trump side pretends to fight for. On top of that, all the other things we told you were accurate. There's already a person who is over there who got a tattoo when he was a kid. His mom says is not part of anything. And of course they could be lying. Well, sure, we get to find out if they ever gave him due process, but he was here legally. Now, if you just kick that aside and go, well, most of them are criminals, then you're clearly part of the problem. You still don't know that, you see? You're choosing to assume into the side that makes it feel a little bit less. If one of them was not here illegally, maybe more of them were. We didn't get to find out because they never gave them due process. The fact is we can prove that one of them had asylum and they took them anyway because he happened to have a tattoo that looks somewhat like what they were looking for. Now, I'm going to show you some more examples right now that show you beyond a shadow of a doubt this is happening. That people are being grabbed with no due process, no warrants presented. And this is, look, I don't want to make this about Trump's America because that's not the reality, guys. This is not about left and right. But the point is that in this current administration, because this seems to be the time to escalate, this is what's happening. But it's simply your U.S. government is putting you in a position they need you to be in for some kind of an agenda. USA Today. Venezuelan women deported under Aliens Enemies Act were returned. I found this interesting for a couple reasons, because it seems like there's just no real guidance here. So basically, women weren't even supposed to be sent. Did they know that? Did they care? Did they hope they'd take them anyway? But the point that I found interesting is that Bukele said specifically that women weren't allowed, but secondarily that we wouldn't take anybody from South American countries because that would cause an issue for us. So clearly they're aware that they're doing something wrong. They're just going to do it wrong in the ways they can get away with. Sounds like a typical Zionist to me. Now it says lawyers for Venezuelans fighting their removal. Oh, here, let me go here. Lawyers for Venezuelans fighting their removal said Monday that the women were returned to the United States after El Salvador refused to accept them. That would seem to, and this is what's funny, by the way. Like I keep showing the false binaries within the larger false binary. This to me is what they're debating. Both the left and the right are all debating whether or not where Trump not listening to the judge while for sending the plane back was all we should care about. That's the main point they're making as well. Since they sent the women back, it seems that maybe Trump was lying about whether they could send them back. Probably. It's such an inconsequential point to the bigger point, the bigger discussion, but that's how they get you distracted. So now you're debating whether Trump lied instead of the fact that they're destroying this country and removing people's rights or ignoring them. But it says that would seem to contradict the Justice Department's claims in court that they couldn't turn the plane around. I mean, are we debating that? Are we that silly? Of course they could have effing turned the plane around. They didn't want to, guys. And they just go, well, it's too late. Like they can't go, hey, guys, turn around. Like that. Of course they can. Why are we even debating that? And that's the thing we're going to get into more in a second. That's what they keep doing. Acting like, no, sorry, it's too late. It already happened, because they know they're going to get away with it right now. But so that's what they seem focused on instead of the reality that people were being turned back that were sent, or people were sent that weren't supposed to be. Like, or how about none of them were given due process? Why isn't that what all of them are focusing on? Some of them are, but it says the government's position expressed today in DC circuit should send chills down every American spine. Said one of these human rights, or I think it was Democracy Forward, somebody speaking up for constitutional rights, saying, when asked directly, the government again maintained that people the president chooses to remove from the country should be afforded no due process. Now, this is what I keep pointing out. Trump, when put directly to the question, said that's what the law says, but yet Tom Homan over here on the same day made the argument, no, they were given due process within the laws we currently have. Same answer, dishonesty on both sides. One, or rather you could argue ignorance on one side, that Trump seems to believe he can do that, even though that's fundamentally false. On Homan's side, it seems he's trying to be a little more sneaky and argue with whatever we put in place, that is what we call due process or whatever. The bottom line is Trump has reiterated once again that that's what he's allowed to do. I can just get rid of who I want with no due process. That's not true. I don't care what narrative you scream into the air. National security. It does not change the fact that you have rights that shall not be infringed. These are all escalations in the direction of being able to remove or ignore what they want when they give you the excuse that you're supposed to take. It says this is a threat to all Americans and a king-like expansion of power. The problem is that people that want to believe he's doing it for the right reasons and somehow magically will give it all back when the right things happen don't care or pretend it's not happening. And that's scary. Lawyers for Venezuelans submitted 2 sworn statements Monday from a Nicaraguan woman and a Venezuelan woman, who said El Salvador refused to accept them. The woman said that they had, and 7 other Venezuelan women were flown back Saturday night. See, these are the guy claiming the video that they were all sent to their country of origin. It's flatly not true. Now it says the 26-year-old Nicaraguan woman, whose name was blacked out in court records, said the Salvadorians refused to accept any woman or anyone from another Central American country. Now it says, quote, I overheard a Salvadorian official tell an ICE officer that the Salvadorian government would not detain someone from another Central American country because of the conflict it would cause. I also heard him say that they would not receive any females because the prison was not for females and females were not mentioned in the agreement. So just think about that. So they didn't even bring it up, but so did you throw them on? Did they throw them on at the last second? I mean, what it speaks to me is just flying by the seat of the pants. We already have countless examples of no warrants being presented, no real process. They're just scooping up people that are in the right place, the wrong time with the right tattoo, with the right skin color. At least in some cases, that is the truth, guys. We've seen it. So what seems like here is they just kind of tacked on some women, didn't realize it was wrong or didn't care, hope they would go anyway. I mean, none of them are given their rights, or they're not acknowledging their God-given inherent rights. But the interesting point is Bukele saying that, well, we don't want to take them from this area because that's going to cause conflict for us. So you just can clearly see that this is wrong. What's happening is wrong in every way you look at it. Now, Independent writes, the chilling effect on free speech. Trump wants green card applicants who are already legally in the United States to hand over social media profiles. It's the same conversation, guys. And you know, the same people who would scream about how important the Constitution is are the ones now going, well, they could be terrorists. You're falling for the trap. I have to believe that's not the majority of people who understand the Constitution, because that just means that dishonesty rules the day. The problem is, as we just showed you, yes, green cards holders, visa holders, and even illegal aliens have the right to the same constitutional protections, which means that you don't have to just hand over your information, whatever it is, because the government demands it. Now, the difference would be in the process for filing for a green card. Yes, they ask for this information. And now, I would argue, at least, even as much as I don't think that's what should be happening, that's the process that you have to go through to be given the green card, and you can choose to or not. So it's still your choice, right? To not come into the country. Whether or not you think that's okay, that's what it is, and it's logical. So, but the point is, now that there are people here, they've already gone through that process. They're saying now, even though we already gone through a vetting process, we're demanding you hand over whatever we ask for when we ask for it. That's what this is. The Trump administration's proposal to vet social media profiles of green card applicants, again, who already went through this process years ago, last week, whenever it happened, already legally in the United States, has been condemned in initial public feedback as an attack on free speech. It is. Whether a green card holder or not, whether it's supporting Palestine or Israel or whatever, they're here legally, and they have a right to their personal privacy, guys. That's any number of overlapping amendments. Search and seizure. I mean, we talk about the 4th and the 15th. That's the obvious overlap to this main point of deportation in immigrants, but nonetheless, all of it applies. USCIS said the vetting of social media accounts is necessary for the enhancement, identity, verification, vetting, and national security screening. You see, they're trying to conflate the process of applying for it with randomly. This is like the equivalent of stop and frisk. The agency also said it's necessary to comply with Trump's executive order titled Protecting the United States from Foreign Terrorists and Other National Security and Public Safety Threats. And see, this is some of the guys that anyone they think might be a terrorist all the time. Don't forget, Trump also floated this stop and frisk like recently before he came into office about the immigration problem. That is one of the most unconstitutional things we've ever seen rolled out in a daily process, where they just go, you right there, stop, I'm going to pat you down. It's insanely unconstitutional. And it happened anyway, though. And he promoted it again, which just shows you where this is going. It's not hard to see. It says, so the U.S. is heading for authoritarian now? He said, this is a violation of the First Amendment. Just somebody speaking about this. Chilling effect on free speech. It says the fear of government scrutiny of online expression will undoubtedly stifle free speech. Even just like, as we pointed out, even just the fear. So somebody's going to go, well, now that they're going to demand my social media profile, I'm not going to speak out about why Palestinians deserve free speech or why they shouldn't be murdered. Because we know that's what they're going after right now. It says this is particularly concerning for individuals from countries with different political climates who may fear the misrepresentation of online activity, because that's what's happening, or misinterpretation. Right now, they're calling people that say free Palestine terrorists. It's not hard to see how ridiculous it is. That's at the highest levels of power, guys. It says civil rights groups have raised concerns that the policy proposal would disproportionately impact critics of Israel. Everybody sees what's happening. And the U.S. government handling of the conflict. In other words, saying committing genocide and calling that out. It says the new proposal comes as the IRS is close to an agreement with ICE to allow officials to use confidential tax data to confirm names and addresses of people they suspect are in the country illegally. See, just because you say in the country illegally, a huge portion of conservatives suddenly forget the Constitution. Even though, as I keep pointing out repeatedly, they still have the constitutional rights that the rest of us have. But the point is suspect. How long have we talked about this? Pre-crime, medical pre-crime. They're building the idea that we can float the idea. And let's just even say that they mean it. Like we genuinely suspect that. It's still a violation of your rights. But how about we understand, as always, that they'll abuse that to get what they want in the moment. Whether it's a welfare check or, stop resisting, these things they use when they know it's about creating the context. So they can claim they suspect anything whenever they want to. And how are you going to prove that they didn't suspect that? You can talk about reasonable doubt and, and the whatever. There's a lot of different things that could be pushed, but it's all subjective in the moment. And all they're opening the door for is the fact that they can literally now access, and also one of the points of the background aspect, AI and everything of the consolidation of the data sources, but that they can simply claim you might be something and use that to dive through everything you ever said, everything you ever know. That is where this all goes. You can see all these things intersecting right now. Now it says ICE could submit names of suspected illegal immigrants to the IRS, or, by the way, suspected whatever they want to claim, right? It's not just about illegal immigrants. That's what they're using to get you ignoring it. And again, I can't, the redundancy needs to be there. I know people get frustrated that the point is about continuing to understand the overlap, which is that ultimately the illegal alien in this context, there's already laws that could be used to go after them. What they're doing is building and adding new law. Like at the same time when they're claiming to be reducing government, it's funny how everything they do seems to be building out the government. But to cross-reference on confidential taxpayer databases, according to insiders. And I'm sure they add some AI bot to help with that process using your personal information. No concern for privacy. The agreement has alarmed career IRS officials who fear it risks abusing a privacy law intended to build criminal cases. Quote, not enforce criminal penalties. Fabian Schmidt, a 34-year-old German electrical engineer, was just deported. We'll talk about that next. There's a bunch of examples we'll go over. Actually, first, I forgot I opened this one. Sally Agris shared this. Orange County couple deported to Colombia after 35 years in the United States. Now, a couple of these examples are not necessarily about right or wrong. It's just wanted to show you, really kind of pose the question. What is this really about? What, like in regard to the issue, is it about the fact that you're worried that there's terrorists sneaking in the country? Is it about the fact that you think that the immigration is draining the system? It seems that everybody's got a different opinion and the response to it dramatically changes based on what you think the issue is, even though it seems the government's coming at it in one very clear, blunt direction that's interested in benefits their agenda. My point, though, is that if we have people like this, and people that are highly educated, doctors in some cases, like these people, who have children, adult children, have been here for 35 years, but there's some kind of a trip up in the system that is, claiming they, like, I'll go through the information. You'll see what I mean. That they end up getting deported because of some, because they're, whatever it is, the new system is saying they shouldn't be here anymore. Okay. There are people right now. I guess the point I'm trying to get at is if these are the kind of people that we're pushing out of the country, people that are adding to the idea of what we pretend this country is doesn't exist anymore. Is it about the American dream? Both sides pretend that, even though that hasn't been the case for a long time. Is it about bringing in the people that can better the country, like Elon and Trump keep pointing to? Well, then these doctors would be the case. So I think what we're dealing with here is something obviously more nefarious. And I think it comes back to personal political opinions, other countries' agendas. But I just want you guys to stand back and ask. It's like, everyone envisioning this on the right seems to be thinking of Palestine supporters and evil foreign students and domestic terrorists, when that doesn't seem to be even remotely what's actually happening. This person says, this shouldn't happen. Why didn't they do the paperwork? And he says they did. Did you read the article? This is typical. Here's the article. It says the American dream ended abruptly last month for Gladys and Nelson Gonzalez, a Laguna, how do you say that? Nagil? I'll just say Laguna for the location, couple deported to Colombia after 35 years of building their life in Southern California. The pair, who raised 3 U.S.-born daughters, were detained during what should have been a routine check-in with immigration officials on February 21st, according to Fox. Their oldest daughter, 33 years old, by the way, Jessica, described the confusion that day. And they were all born in this country. Her mother called after initially receiving an extension so they're allowed to be here. They were given an extension to stay in the country, only to be arrested moments later when a different agent intervened. So is this the Democrat-Republican perspective, right? It doesn't make any sense right now. It says this official was cruel, they said. One of their 3 daughters said this. They arrested my dad first and then called my mom in to arrest her too. It says they were put in handcuffs by their wrists and ankles, which seems a little bit extreme, and treated as criminals before getting to these detention centers. Now, is that because they're now framing this as everyone's an MS-13 gang member terrorist? I mean, however, that seems to be the presentation. Why would you take people that have been here for 33 years who have education, jobs, family, and chain them by arms and wrist and legs like there's some kind of, I think it's about the impression they're trying to give, or that they've been trained to see it this way. But it says all they said is they extended their stay, even though every year they've had permission to be here. The point is their excuse for taking them was they extended their stay, but they were allowed to. And it says, and they're law-abiding citizens who show up and are doing their duty to check in with immigration and say, hey, I'm here. I'm not hiding or doing anything wrong. So every time they were called, they go into their meeting, they check in, they say, and which I hate the idea of any free human being having to go in and check base with the government. But the point is they do so. They come in, they say, we're here. We're not doing anything wrong. We've got jobs, we've got families. So what is it that we're trying to get rid of in this country? Why would this kind of group be the ones that get kicked away when you have examples of a hell of a lot more that's problematic? It says, for decades, the Gonzales had diligently followed immigration protocols. Nelson worked as a phlebotomist, which I forgot I was going to look that up, actually, what exactly that was. He does the surgical opening or puncture in a vein in order to withdraw blood and introduce a fluid. So I guess maybe people that draw blood, I thought it was a different name for that. Or maybe the person that puts in, I don't know. Point is, a doctor, right? Or rather, somebody with a specialized field. Gladys maintained their household. Their daughters insist their parents they never missed appointments and continually pursued legal pathways to remain in the country. They called home since 1989 when they fled Colombia, again seeking asylum from violence and drugs. By the way, Colombia, a group that the U.S. government has always supported despite the leading narco trafficker in the world of cocaine. But they'll happily call out Maduro for narco trafficking while working with Colombia, because totally not hypocrites, though. But it says the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement spokesman, an ICE spokesman, provided a different perspective, simply telling the Orange County registrar that the couple had, quote, exhausted all legal options to remain in the U.S. between March 2000 and 2021, despite numerous appeals through various immigration channels. Okay, so what is it that's pushing them out of the country? This is what I'm not understanding. Are they a drain on resources, even though they're he's in a specialized field and their children have jobs? And, I don't understand what the logic would be. Now, look, if you just want to say that they weren't given the right to be here after they've been here this long, why wouldn't they just go here? You're allowed to be here. Here's extension of your process. Is it that you want to force them into getting citizenship, which I would in some way would understand, but that's not being addressed. I guess the larger point I'm simply making is that as we go into some other cases, this seems like people being swept up in some political agenda, even though they seem to meet every metric of what even Trump and Elon Musk say are the kind of people that we want in this country. Now, since the Gonzales family story reflects the broader shift in immigration enforcement priorities now that now target anyone living in the country without authorization, rather than focusing primarily on those with criminal records. But here, even they had authorization. But that's a good point to think about, right? As we can see all these people going to El Salvador without criminal records. Shouldn't it be the people that are I think that's the game, is that it's trying to give you the impression that that's all there is. But apparently they're now back in Colombia. They have family there. I mean, it's just not one of the worst stories, but it is interesting to me that this is what we're focusing on. And that does seem to be a lot of what I'm seeing. Here's another example, a German national, which kind of an interesting overlap as well, is it's like all these Republicans think they're focusing on a bunch of Palestinian brown supporters, but it doesn't seem to be a lot of what's happening. German national arrested at Boston airport and his family have no clue why he's being held by ICE. This is from March 17th. The family of a German national who has been in the U.S. on a green card for 17 years and was arrested at Boston Logan International Airport has no idea why he's being detained by ICE. Fabian Schmidt joins a growing number of visa and green card holders in the U.S. who have found themselves swept up in the Trump administration's aggressive immigration crackdowns. The 34-year-old electrical engineer, so again, somebody who has a specialized field, or at least something that's not just average, that work at McDonald's, has held a green card since 2008 and renewed it last year. That should matter, guys. According to his mother, who lives also in this country on a green card. He was arrested at Boston Logan International Airport on March 7th after returning from a short vacation visiting family in Germany. which as we get into one in a second of one, a girl has family in Lebanon and why they detained her, I think this is somewhat related. My personal opinion. So he goes to Germany and comes back, and that's when this happens. It says senior, is it senior? Yeah, I think the last person's name is senior claimed he was interrogated before being taken to Rhode Island's Watt Detention Center in Central Falls. She has not been heard. The mother has not heard from her son since March 11th. Now, even that is just wrong. Like the idea that you just disappear these people with no due process, with no ability to recontact anybody. Like, look, even if you agree with all that, that's not what we've always pretended this country is. Some of us have been aware it kind of hasn't ever been, but realizing that we at least pretend, we tell ourselves that we're the better, right? We're the one showing the world the way. Well, in that case, then this person's clearly not a criminal in the case of what you're claiming in the larger sense. Like you could say, but even then, he's not even here illegally. He has a green card. So what is the point of treating him like a terrorist and not allowing him and shipping him off to some dark zone where he's not allowed to contact his family? I think there's something else driving this, but at the very least, from a U.S. perspective, it's about showing you what will happen if you challenge the power, even though he's not. Now, Schmidt faced a misdemeanor charge a decade ago, but has no active legal issues. U.S. Customs and Border Protection Assistant Commissioner Hilton Beckham said in a statement, if statutes or visa terms are violated, travelers may be subject to detention and removal. Well, yes, but with due process, where you say, here's how they violated the terms, here's the evidence that shows they did that, and that's why we're doing it. That is what the point is, and that's not happening. They're claiming we can just say, you're here because we allow you, now you can go. Well, that's the same way they're playing with your constitutional rights, acting like they can give and take away when they want to. Same point. Just recognize if you can think about that for yourself and know the government can't just be like, right now, then you don't have free speech because I say so. Well, the same thing applies to him or anybody else in this country. If you think they broke these rules, then you could prove it then, right? It's easy. Show the evidence, kick them out. But that's not what they're doing, and you think you know why. The family claims that Schmidt was forced to strip naked before being placed in a cold shower and shoved back into a chair, according to reports. His family said agents pressured him to give up his green card. Doesn't this all sound very familiar? We just talked about the forcing to be claimed to Moss, right? He was also held without food or water and taken to the hospital after collapsing from the flu, his mother claimed. Of course, Customs Border Patrol says that's not true. Now, who knows? Maybe they're lying. Maybe he's lying. Maybe they're making it up. Who knows? But it is a little bit eerie, especially since we know that they are breaking the law, that they are ignoring your constitutional rights and everybody else, it seems, and how weirdly aligned it is with what we keep seeing happen everywhere else. Anywhere else they're involved, whether Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, Libya, and it weirdly seems to kind of be the same thing we see from their groups. This woman we'll talk about next. She's another one that was been deported. But it says the case comes as Ivy League doctor Rasha Alawi was deported to Lebanon. That's what we'll talk about next, despite a court order that she stay in the United States until a court could determine the more details of her case. She's a Brown medicine doctor from Brown University, specializing in kidneys. She must stay in Lebanon. Oh, now she's forced to stay in Lebanon while a federal judge goes back and forth with the Trump administration as they ignore what's happening, as they intentionally defied a court order to halt her deportation. This is a different story, guys. So many of these are happening right now that people aren't even reporting on it. The interesting thing here is it's Lebanon, where Israel's literally murdering people. So the age-old claim of, you can't send them back to a war zone, for example. It's an interesting point. But it says Alaway was also detained at Boston Logan International Airport. So could just be coincidence, the same place, but maybe there's more of a focal point on certain locations. And this is after returning from a family trip, a trip visiting family in Lebanon. Now, I'm sure you know where this is going. This is her story. Independent as well. Deported Ivy League doctor will remain in Lebanon as judge hears arguments over Trump ignoring court order. Now, again, they seem to be hyper focused on whether they ignore the order or not, which is important. But my God, the ignoring of human and constitutional rights seems a bit more important to me. But I do think it's interesting. It's the same excuse. And you'll see how very clear it is. They just pretended like they didn't know, rushed her out of the country, and they go, oh, too late. We already did it. It was an accident. They know what they're doing, guys. You'll see it in this case right here. And I'm willing to bet you they delete the evidence because otherwise you'll be able to prove they knew and did it anyway. Here's the story. District Judge Leo Sorokin. No, oh, by the way, take note of all these different judge names. Interestingly, you're only hearing a few of them focused on. Do you know why? Because not all of them are left-leaning Democrat judges. Isn't that interesting? And don't you wonder why they won't point that out? You all know the truth. What's interesting, though, is they only want to keep focusing on the ones they can make a case about. So then the broad audience of the partisan field just continues to assume. That's how that works. They keep saying that, so you watch and you go, yeah, they're all Democrat radicals. It's not even true. Not all of them are even Democrat. And definitely not all of them are radical. You look at their rulings. They seem to be going different directions. But I argue all of them have political leanings, and that's obvious. But this case, well, I didn't even look into this one. District Judge Leo Sorokin ordered officials with Custom and Border Protection to court in Boston Monday to explain why the Ivy League doctor was deported, apparently in defiance of the court order that said, don't send her away. We need to find out what the case is here, because it's quite obvious what's going on. And I don't want to jump the gun. You'll see it. I think this is for whether it's for Israel or because of the agenda that both the U.S. and Israel are involved in. People like this are being targeted. Meanwhile, allowing actual criminals to stay in this country while getting rid of Ivy League doctors because they support Palestine. Now, it says the government lawyers argued that border agents had not received notice of last Friday's order until she had already left. It's ridiculous, guys. Not only that, it goes further where the person literally went in the office, was ringing the emergency bell and saying, guys, there's an order. And they ignored her. Nobody came to the front of the office. The government will have until March 24th, apparently, to address allegations, and attorneys for the deported Alloway, mispronounce her name, have until March 31st to respond to the government's motion to dismiss the case. Meanwhile, she's in Lebanon. Now, it says Border Patrol officers searched her phone, which, by the way, I think is always a violation of your rights, and would not immediately admit her to the U.S., according to court documents. It says in court documents defending her removal, government lawyers claim she attended the funeral of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah while she was in Lebanon and supported him, quote, from a religious perspective. So you see where this is now, guys? So the bottom line is, but just to make that clear, this is when she was trying to come back into the United States, right? So as she's coming back after coming from Lebanon, and look, honestly, I can't suss out whether she actually went or not. It wouldn't surprise me. She probably did. But she went to see her family in Lebanon. She tried to come back. They would search her phone, and for a moment didn't really let her back in. But then let her back in the United States, and then swooped her up because of, from a religious perspective, they claim she supported the Nasrallah. I mean, that's as insane as saying that you are going to arrest somebody in the UK because they believe in Donald Trump. I mean, guys, it's insane what they're doing today. That's why whoever they don't like is suddenly a terrorist. Well, just suddenly, that's how this government's operated for decades. But she simply goes to a funeral, if that's even what happened, comes back to this country, didn't break any laws, not a single one, and she has now been targeted for removal because Israel has a problem with that. How do we not notice that? Or at the very least, through Israel's direction, the United States has labeled anybody supporting anybody against their agenda as terrorist, therefore she has to go. Who cares if she's a specialized doctor who helps this country? Who cares if she hasn't broken any laws? Who cares if she's here legally? It says they also claim to have discovered sympathetic photos and videos. Well, guess what? We don't get to see anything because there's no due process. You have to realize, guys, this is somebody here in the country legally who has a specialized field as a doctor. And they just swooped her up and sent her to Lebanon with no process, no crimes, no evidence presented. Now, we're past the point of illegal aliens now. We're talking about a person in the country legally that they just decide to remove. And it's not hard to see how quickly this becomes you. And it says officers, quote, determined that her true intentions, go ahead and try to suss out how they did that, in the United States could not be determined. Well, yeah, let's be real. You can't determine anybody's true intentions. That'd be your assumption, unless they literally wrote out, here are my intentions. They're simply trying to say because they can't decide what her intentions are that she has to be removed. Again, if you're an honest person, this is insane. This is so far out above. If you understand and truly believe in inherent constitutional rights, you should be falling out of your chair. This is such an incredible overreach. It's everything. Again, if it was Obama or Clinton, these people would be marching through the streets with torches. It says at 7:18 p.m., Sorokin the judge ordered that Alloway, quote, shall not be moved outside the District of Massachusetts without providing the court 48 hours advance notice of the move and the reason therefore. 7:18 p.m. Now it says, and then basically in the court filing went public Monday, Alloway's attorney, Claire Sanders, said she was not able to reach the Border Patrol agents. Here's why. She, in the building, by the way, well before she was, because jumping ahead, she actually left at 7:43. So 7:18, the ruling. This woman makes it to the building well before they left and says, quote, I yelled loudly and repeatedly through the office, trying to get an officer's attention in case the officer or one of his colleagues were simply at the back in a position not visible from the front portion of the office. Nobody was there. She said, I received no response. During the 20 minutes that I was waiting at the office, she said she called the number listed on the handwritten sign approximately 8 more times. So we're going to pretend like they just perfectly were no one answered the phone. Nobody was in the front of the office in the perfect gap between that ruling and when she was there with the ruling and when they let her fly away in a rapid time frame. This was a deliberate choice, clearly because that person was identified. That's my opinion. Same with, we have Batar US identifying Khalil there. And one more example coming up where Israeli groups are going, that person. And this US government says, how high, right? They jump, tell them to jump. They say, how high, which way, what to do. You respond. This is them deliberately making themselves scarce so they don't have to address the issue. But here's the point. They were text, there were calls that went through. They had the information. That's where this goes. It says Alloway, who specializes in kidney medicine, was reportedly on a valid H-1B visa. Isn't that interesting? You know, the same one that Elon used to stack up his own team, but this doesn't apply because she went to Lebanon, did something that wasn't illegal. You claim she has support for something that, by the way, also wouldn't be illegal because that would be ideological freedom and free speech. None of those things are terrorists. I mean, we're talking, I mean, it's just insane. I mean, there's so many ways to look at this, whether you can argue Lebanon in general or Hezbollah specifically, they are not terrorist organizations. It's one of the most obviously proven things in the conversation. They're just deciding to make it that way because they're their adversary. As you're watching the people they're fighting commit genocide in Gaza, in Syria, in Lebanon, but they're not the bad guys. But it says that she acquired from the American consulate in Lebanon. So the U.S. government gave her a visa because she was an expert. According to Thomas S. Brown, a lawyer who works on immigration and visa applications and cases for doctors attached to Brown Medicine. Brown University, Ivy League. The doctor has studied and worked in the U.S. for 6 years. She has been working at Rhode Island Hospital for the last year caring for kidney transplant patients. The transplant division's medical director, Dr. George Bayless, told the Boston Globe. Now it says, quote, in addition, the government shall preserve, this is what the judge is saying. So basically saying the allegations are supported by a detailed, just going quickly, they're saying, look, we know you got the information, right? This is a problem. So in addition to what else we're saying, the government shall preserve all of the documents bearing Dr. Alloway's arrival and removal since the issuance of the visa described in the petition, including emails and text messages. How much you want to bet that magically disappears? Or whoopsie, we didn't know we had to keep it. That's how this seems to be going, because you'll be able to prove that they got the information and chose to ignore it to get her out of the country. Why is this who we're even focusing on? Back to that first point. An Ivy League doctor, a specialist who had no criminal record? I think it's important we ask that. It seems to be weirdly tailored around things that are inconvenient for Israel. And as always, they have rights, none of which were afforded. Milwaukee mother deported to Laos, shaken as she faces decades without family in the United States. Now, Yang, here's her picture right here, and this is an interesting one. This one, there appears to be a crime that was committed around cannabis, which you know my thoughts on, but I find it interesting to give you the kind of full breadth of what's happening. None of this seems to be really focused on what they keep screaming at you, which is telling. Yang was born in a refugee camp in Thailand, but gained legal status as a permanent U.S. resident until she pleaded guilty to cannabis-related charges, which, by the way, is just insane to me that we're still even playing that game. But it says, and served 30 months in a federal prison. 30 months for cannabis. Well, genocide, no big deal or whatever. It doesn't always have to be that point. And there's plenty of things that our government are doing right now that no one cares about, while putting people in jail for 30 months for a plant. That's one of the most harmless things on the planet. But it says, having taken a plea deal, mistakenly believing that her green card would not be at risk, she is now one of the millions and millions of people Donald Trump pledged to kick out of the country during his campaign. But is this what we thought? Is this the reality? People who are, part of society, but chose to smoke cannabis the wrong time and get removed? I mean, isn't it what he keeps telling you? A bunch of rapists and terrorists, because he's tapping into your extreme nature. I just think it's interesting. Now, but the point of this one is that she did commit a crime, but went through the process, kind of giving the impression that it wouldn't include her green card, and then they just took that too. Now, here is one of the last ones, or I think a couple more. This is Tufts International student, Rameza Ozturk, detained by the feds. This one, I believe, was today. Now, here, I'll play this first, actually. Now, this is a clip that was caught of this person being rounded up. Now, again, this is as it says, a Turkish doctor. She's a doctoral student. She's seeking her doctorate. A candidate at Tufts University in custody last night. Friends and supporters suspect that Ozturk is the first Boston area college student detained by federal agents over simply, and this is even what they're talking about, pro-Palestinian activism. Now, take note of how when they recognize people are filming, that all of a sudden these federal agents all pull up their masks. So it's funny how they love to make that case about COVID-19, but these are all Republican on the Republican administration. No one's going to call them out for that. The point, though, is they clearly hiding their identity. Now, what you're going to notice in a lot of these, especially the one we come to next, is that they are not, in most cases, giving warrants that I can see, not really identifying themselves, because they feel like they're acting on some like extrajudicial, above the law situation. Oh, they'll pull up their masks.
You guys covering your faces? You want to take those masks off? Is this a kidnapping?
If you listen closely, which is probably hard to hear for the podcast, but it makes me sick how she's going, what's happened? What's going on? And they're like, don't, you're fine. You're calm down. Yeah, calm down. We're just violently arresting, or rather just, ignoring your constitutional rights. Just relax. Stop resisting. It's like when people ask questions like, what's happening? They're like, don't stop. Don't speak out. Stop resisting. Just calm down. I mean, there's no reason that you should have to be calm or you're not acting violently, but like, this is insane. What you're doing is a violation. What you're doing is, you're the Gestapo at this point. I just think it's funny how they're always like, just relax. Everything's fine.
Yeah, you don't look like it. Why are you hiding your faces? Why are you hiding your faces? Can I see some faces here? How do I know this is the police?
And why is she handcuffed even?
Seems like bullshit to me. Certainly looks like it.
I mean, you have to realize, like, the other person was handcuffed legs and feet. Like, what's the point of that? Are they charged with a violent crime? I mean, realistically, this person's being arrested for, to find information, right? That's how they play. But it's obvious that this is being done. Right. And as Katie points out in the chat, 5 agents for a small doctorate student. Talk about government waste.
Bit of a kidnapping going on here.
Look at that jerk agent just doesn't want to get out of the road. If people are, it's just, You know, I recommend high impact flicks. If you want to watch some just outrageous things the cops do on an everyday basis, or how little they seem to understand about your constitutional rights while screaming about your rights. I mean, you get the gist of it. So, as Ryan Grimm points out, or first, Aaron Mate simply says, for all the legitimate complaints that MAGA had about Dems cracking down on free speech, it's this one. For all the legitimate complaints that MAGA had about Dems cracking down on free speech, nothing compares to what the Trump administration is doing to put Israel first. I agree. That's the point about this. It's disgusting. It's like the same thing with COVID and Trump from before. They're rolling out what is in earnest, but the Dems were doing too, or rather just your government was doing all sides, but they do it in earnest to the person you think is supposed to be fighting it, so you don't see it. And here's what Ryan Grimm said. For more than 200 years, generations of Americans fought to make this a free country. Never perfect, but always aspiring to it. MAGA, and I argue more so the team sport Republicans, there's a lot of people that believe in that are not bad people, that think they just are being manipulated or are currently calling it out. But he says MAGA ripping up that legacy to defend Israel against criticism or protest while it is starving a civilian population. Now, continuing, it says her attorney, his name is Kanbabe, I'll point out why I said that later, Ozturk, who is observing Ramadan, was on her way to meet up with friends to break her fast. Typical. The detention comes days after a pro-Israel group called the Canary Mission reportedly doxed Ozturk for anti-Israel activism. So this is what gets insane to me. Another person who is here legally, somebody who is a doctor, or rather going to be a doctor, going to school, who spoke out in something she believes in. So if I told you she was arrested and deported because she spoke out about what Russia was doing, would that be outrageous to you? If I told you she was deported to another country because she spoke out about what the U.S. was doing anywhere in the world, would that be out? Yes. No, people are like, no way. But for some reason, when you point out that she had spoke out about it, even if it was like, I hate Israel more than anything, why is that suddenly something we think is acceptable? At least some people. I really feel it's a rapidly diminishing number because it's impossible to hold that stance if you're in any way intellectually consistent or have integrity. The bottom line is this is what you have. This is what's protected. You can be anti whatever you want. You can say, I believe or I don't believe in anything you want. That's free speech. It's ideological freedom. Even the point about the other one saying religious belief, that's still religious freedom, right? But not when it applies to things Israel don't like. I've never seen a more rapid succession of examples of how this government, all of it, is fighting for anything Israel doesn't want or like. Or, either way you look at it, wants to stop or wants to support. To extreme levels that are destroying in front of our eyes everything we believe this country stands for. And you got all these screaming red Republican talking heads at the team sport politics side, Jones and all the rest, who are blindly going along with this. So, an Israeli group says that person spoke out against Israel and they sweep her up, deport her. Or at least in the process of. Now, it says reports have pointed to an op-ed in the Tufts Daily in which Ozturk and other students call on the university to, get this, guys, here's her terrorist activity, quote, acknowledge the Palestinian genocide and divest from companies tied to Israel. Here, interestingly, exactly what they historically told you to do instead of terrorism. Go through the political avenue, right? And then you do, and they call that terrorism too. How dare you call for them to divest? Like the successful movement during apartheid South Africa did, that we all support and praise today, right? But when you do it against Israel, bad guy, terrorist, because Trump and Israel Netanyahu said. That's all they have, guys. But they say that's terrorism because you're supporting a terrorist group. That's as simple as that. Now, her lawyer says she doesn't know her whereabouts or even how to reach her. Welcome to 2025 America, guys. You just get scooped up on the street by a bunch of nameless, faceless people with no warrant, dragged away somewhere, God knows where, probably in El Salvador for all we know. Why? Because she spoke out against Israel, really supported Palestine. She doesn't know of any criminal charges being filed. They don't need to. They didn't do it with Khalil. They don't care. And recognize both of them are here legally. And they're point blank telling you it's an ideological thing. There's no room in that conversation, guys. That's not supposed to be the way this country works. She filed a petition in federal court Tuesday night to ensure that Ozturk won't be removed from Massachusetts, which a federal judge approved. But we don't know where she is, so maybe she already left. And what are you going to get? Well, too late. It was already done. We didn't see the order, like they're doing every other time. The Trump administration is increasingly targeting student protesters for their political views on Gaza. The most high-profile examples, of course, have been Khalil and Chung, we'll talk about next. A federal judge Tuesday granted a temporary restraining order barring federal immigration officials from detaining Chung, who we'll show you next, a legal permanent resident. Like, you realize how quickly this changed from illegal immigrants to people who are here legally and just have the wrong ideas? Chung has been here since he was 7 years old. Judge blocks detention of Columbia student targeted by ICE. A federal judge issued an order Tuesday barring federal immigration officials from detaining a Columbia student whom the Trump administration has targeted simply for protesting for Palestine. That's Yun Seo Chung's case is the latest example of the Trump administration's efforts to detain and deport people who are legally in the United States, including some who have been targeted for their political views and activities. Seems like the majority, almost all. I don't even see any examples of, I mean, in the context of here legally. I haven't seen any of them that they claim have actually committed crimes. Any of them. Yun Seo no longer has to fear that ICE will spirit her away to a distant prison simply because she spoke up for Palestinian rights, says her lawyer. Well, assuming that's what happened, though, I guess we'll have to find out whether they, missed the order and sent them somewhere else. Chung is a legal permanent resident in the United States who has lived here since she was 7 years old. A Department of Homeland Security spokesperson told Axios in a statement that Chung had, quote, this is what they claimed, engaged in concerning conduct, including when she was arrested by NYPD during a pro-Hamas protest at Bernard College. She is being sought for removal proceedings under the immigration laws. Oh, did she get charged with a crime? No, they just arrested her alongside of a lot of other people protesting for Palestine. And that's enough for them because all they do is call it pro-Hamas, and well, Hamas is a terrorist organization, and we pretend Israel didn't fund them, and so it's all done. No, it's still, even if all that was true, they still get due process, you see, but they don't care, guys, because these people are not working for American interests. In fact, they're quite literally working against them. Now, this is actually terrifying. This, by the way, is what I believe is probably happening more often than not. Every case we've shown you is basically exactly like this. My point is I'm willing to bet you it's happening more than we could possibly imagine right now in cases where we just don't see it. This clip is coming from Maya Media off of Blue Sky. And it's a clip showing you what's happening. People not identifying themselves, not presenting warrants, breaking in a car window to drag people out of the car without ever even truly identifying themselves. Who even know? I'll let the video break it down for you.
Oh my God!
And she's pregnant, by the way.
ICE agents swarmed a vehicle on Monday in Spokane Valley, breaking its windows and forcibly arresting 2 people. Kayla, who was 7 months pregnant, repeatedly asked agents to show a warrant, but they refused. Her husband was in the process of obtaining a green card. ICE said there were active charges for their arrests, though their attorney says there is no warrant in the system. ICE said the men were linked to a Venezuelan gang but provided no evidence, and Kayla has denied this. The executive
and you know how we could find out? Yeah, same old story, right? Due process.
Director of Latinos in Spokane said escalating ICE raids reflect Trump's broader push for mass deportations, which leaves Spokane's immigrant community vulnerable due to its proximity to the Canadian and Idaho borders.
Open the door. No, you can! You can! Why? It's illegal!
See, the problem is that same old story, right? Is that people act like they're using our right. No, the point is they all have the same rights you do. Doesn't matter. Even if he was breaking the law, the rights still apply, guys. You still have the process for a reason because it gets abused. And all you're doing, if you pretend that's not a problem, is allowing them to open that door even wider. And tomorrow it'll be your family. So as the Hill reports, the Trump administration invokes, as you might have expected was coming, state secrets privilege in deportation flight cases. So going back to all of those cases where they're going, Give us the evidence. Did you know what happened? Where are they? Well, they're going, guess what, guys? National security. And another reason why they declared the Alien Enemies Act, because they needed to just hide behind national security. The Trump administration invoked the state secret privilege late Monday in its court battle over its use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport Venezuelan migrants, again refusing to provide more detail about the flights to a judge. The point is, it's not about who. I don't care about whether he could have turned it around. Obviously, he could have. The point is about what actually happened. What's the charge? What's the evidence? How can you prove, which is what the judge was actually asking. How can you prove, what is the evidence to prove that they are actually gang members? Because they do have due process. And now they're going national security. See, that's what an unaccountable authoritarian government looks like. There's no balance there. There's no check. It's just, we do what we want. You can't push it. And then when the judges try to highlight that, they try to get them impeached. And here's Elon Musk paying people $100 to sign petitions to get him impeached. It's disgustingly dishonest. Whether or not they're politically motivated, which I know they are, the invocation deems details about the flights as a state secret, seeking to limit information to District Judge James Boasberg specifically, who has vowed to, quote, get to the bottom of whether the Trump administration violated his order to turn them around. It's just, it's what you would expect. Even if you're on their side, even if you agree with them, what this is an abuse of power. If you're right, then prove it. Just show the evidence. This is not what you do when you're right or have the evidence on your side. The point is, people just support it because they choose to. Now here is, as Max Blumenthal says, Elon made little Marco say this. We showed you it recently. Kill the Boer is a chant that incites violence, he says. South Africa's leaders and politicians must take action to protect Afrikaner and other disfavored minorities. The United States is proud to offer those individuals who qualify for admission to our nation amid their continued horrible threat of violence. Oh, great. So you don't care about people getting sent back to violent areas who are doctors because they just, have the wrong color. But these people can be brought in, even though the whole point, these are very different people in the context of where they come from. They're Dutch migrants in South Africa. It's not, whether they're white or not, it is the exact problem they claim they care about. But it doesn't matter because clearly what they care about is not what they claim, okay? At the same time, they are literally pushing people out of the country who are either becoming doctors at Brown University or literal doctors at the moment or specialized fields because there's a little bit of a compliance issue. I don't even mean legally, like they just decided to renew it or whatever. Meanwhile, they're going, come on, all these people come in who are part, in some cases, of pretty radical extreme groups. I think you already know why, guys. This is not about what they claim. This is for somebody else's interest. And Max simply points out, meanwhile, in Israel, the country that controls Rubio's career, there's an annual event dedicated to chanting death to Arabs, which is also the policy it's currently implementing in Gaza. It's very easy to prove. And I simply, what was it? I thought I grabbed, that was it. I grabbed this article. So in this, you can see them chanting that. It's a very common thing. So if you care about one, you care about all of it, right? But that's not how this works. There's logical inconsistency. Just in case you forgot, as Robert wrote, Israeli settlers consistently use arson attacks to burn Palestinians alive. The image you're looking at is a child. His name is Ali. Here's Times of Israel. Jewish extremists taunt Ali's on the grill at the toddler's family, right? So basically they burn the family's house down, burn the child alive, and then when people, as the family walks by them, they chant, Ali's on the grill, and they're dancing around. And then here's a video of them doing that, along with Ben Gvir, by the way, chanting, Ali's on the grill with a little effigy of the little child and stabbing him and burning him. This is literal, look at the child's right there. They're smiling and dancing. It doesn't matter what you believe, what political side you have. These are monsters. Anybody that's going to celebrate the death of an infant baby because he's the wrong color, the wrong skin, this is who's leading the country right now. I don't mean Trump in particular. I just mean the ideology, the power structure that is driving action is this right here. And that doesn't even have to be just Israel, guys. I'm just simply saying that if we can't recognize the kind of unbridled hatred and racism that's stemming through these people's actions, then you don't want to see it. It's everywhere you look right now. It's on the surface. They're murdering people in Palestine, openly telling you why. People don't want to ignore it. Now, to end in general, the biggest problem for me is how clearly this has already evolved into, well, maybe Americans are next. As we talked about. Trump admin, this is the wrong one, actually. It was this one right here, even though they're all in here already. The point was this is about Trump suggesting that they could be sending Americans to El Salvador. So here's that clip I told you earlier. You've probably all seen it already, but this is Donald Trump openly saying that. This was not a joke. He doesn't smile or balk or tweet. He immediately says they're terrorists. So if you can't see already it's a hair, like a non-existent divider right now between deciding to make it Americans who go next. If they don't care about the legal challenges right now, then why would they care about the other? It's the same point. I mean, obviously, to those that care, it's all wrong, and an American would be a huge escalation, but it's already basically happening if you understand the rights, the law. It's the same difference. And here he is telling you, at the very least, threatening that it could be the case if you choose to push back.
And I just want to thank him. He's going through a lot, what they're doing to him. And these people are going to be caught, and they're going to be caught, and they're going to be prosecuted. And from what they tell me, I see this just by watching your programs and reading the news, but from what they tell me, they could get 20 years in jail, and they'll get it. I'll tell you, there's going to be no leniency, and there'll be no pardons. I can tell you that right now.
And you said this morning 20 years in jail, and then maybe they get, you said this morning 20 years in jail, and then maybe they'll go to one of these prisons in El Salvador. Do you think with the way that the judges have been issuing injunctions, it would be easier or harder to send these Tesla domestic terrorists to a jail in El Salvador than these MS-13 or Tren de Aragua guys?
Well, I view these people as terrorists just like others. When I looked at those showrooms burning and those cars, not one or two, like 7, 8, 10 burning, exploding all over the place. These are terrorists.
Sure. Okay, fine. Let's just pretend that's the case. So it's pretty easy then to argue that if you go beyond 7, 8, 10 Tesla cars and, I don't know, maybe kill 80,000 children or, 50,000 people, would that then be terrorist too? Like how? Obviously, right? So you've set the bar, Trump. If terrorism is Tesla's burning in a showroom and no one dies, then it's clearly when somebody dies, then that would be terrorism, right? Funny how the inconsistencies come all over the place. On top of the obvious, what he's talking about is one example. And there's been a few of them that have gone to the level of federal crime. Nobody should deny that. Nobody should say it's okay. Nobody should support people burning people's property down. It's insanely stupid to pretend anybody honest would support that. That is the political partisan game they want you to fall into. Justifying the thing that you shouldn't because of your side. That's what they want from you. The problem is obvious, guys. And what's happening here is that's an example of an extreme part. 90% of the rest of them, a bunch of random Karens keying Nazi signs into a Tesla car. That's it. And that's what he's calling terrorism. Yes, he points to the bigger example, but you can see the Joneses of the world, the Nasorders, and all the rest of them, and the insurrection bar, we all regularly calling it domestic terrorism when they highlight somebody getting caught on a camera scratching a car. This is terrifying because it's real and it's happening in front of you. And people have already been removed for reasons that are insignificant in the context of what's going on in the world. If not completely insignificant because they simply were in the wrong place at the wrong time and have the wrong idea. Here's Dan Bongino. Today is March 25th, and if you're considering an act of domestic terrorism, then we will hunt you down and find you. Because that was necessary, right? Because all the domestic terrorists are checking in with Dan Bongino. Go, oh, don't do it today. He's looking. It's just so stupid. It's all theater. It's all to go, we're coming after the big bad guys, as they ignore all the real big bad guys and go after people that happen to have the wrong skin color or, said the wrong thing about Israel. Who they've all told you, number one in your heart, Israel. Israel supportive of Israel. That's what he said. On the record. Well, the FBI says the FBI has been investigating the increase in violent activity towards Tesla. That's what they're talking about. Not everything else. Not child trafficking. Not Epstein files. Not murdering of innocent people in multiple countries by all of your allies. No. Whether Teslas might be targeted. In whatever level of violence it is. It's all terrorism because Elon Musk. Insane. But that's what he talks about. We'll find you. Well, just to include it in case you missed it, and just like that, Republicans are now supporting electric vehicles, but just the right ones. They are laughing at you. Now, interestingly, you have this overlap where Fox News is saying Dems who railed against domestic terrorism silent as Trump floats 20-year sentences for Tesla vandals. Like, I'm not sure if they think they know. Like, they're trying to make the idea that Democrats are somehow soft on domestic terrorism when it matters, even though it's like they undermine their own point, right? Like, it's insane because you read the article for yourself. That's what they're doing. The idea is this isn't domestic terrorism. And whether all of you absolute, pretenders in Congress and all of our two-party illusion decide to care more. The bottom line is you're trying to use the two-party illusion to make people who wouldn't otherwise support it pretend like this is terrorism and that they're shying from calling it that. As always, not whether it should be done, but how. Always how this works. But here's Alex Jones, bombshell. President Trump believes he knows which globalist scum. Do you mean the Israeli government? Do you mean the Great Reset dynamic that Elon Musk and Trump are rolling out? No, not those globalist scum. Okay, sorry. The globalist scum who are behind funding radical left Democrat terrorists, torching, shooting, and bombing Teslas across the nation. Yeah, you mean that one example? Or you mean all the rest of them that are they're keying the paint off a car? It's just insane. It's childish. It's naive. The point, though, Trump thinks he knows what might have happened. Breaking! Great factual reporting. But the overarching point, guys, is this is about directing your outrage towards this small story instead of everything else going on. Or how about everything else that they promised that isn't happening? Nobody should deny that people are breaking the law, then hold them accountable. It's not really news breaking story, guys. If they key a car, give them vandalism charge. If they bomb a car, put them in jail. Done. Simple. For you guys to build this out into something ridiculous, give me evidence. Otherwise, stop talking about it. If you have evidence of some Democrat plot of manufacturing it, that will be relevant because it's coordinated. Still not terrorism, but present your evidence or shut up about it. Because all I keep hearing is a bunch of floated narratives and hyperbolic statements about how Democrats and well, guess what? Just like Soros dynamic, you have Elon doing the same damn thing, or whoever else in a million other examples of oligarchs funding everything. Every group from every moment they support them, they give them signs. It's everywhere you look. It is your government. It is the two-party illusion of which Alex and the rest are a part. But as we already showed you what matters in the conversation about how they're overshadowing everything else, here's what I think is what it's really about, at least in some case. Here's Alex Jones, not his account, but the one that's like profiteering for him underneath everything he does, says, are you shopping at the real Alex Jones store? You're not going to want to miss the Cybertruck giveaway. Oh, weird. It's almost like there's something more to the whole story. Order a Doge t-shirt and chainsaw t-shirt and Orland truck. Yeah, seems like they're profiting wildly off the whole thing. Well, here's another one. Same post, by the way. There's like 7 of these down here. Tip of the Spear bundle. Order the Tip of the Spear bundle from Alex Jones and enter to win a new Jeep Rubicon. My God. You get the sense why this is why I hate this stuff. Not just because grifters like this do it all the time, but this is why you rarely, even on my show itself, half the time I don't promote this, even donating. It grosses me out. And this is the most ridiculous case of it. Now, this is a different post showing you the same thing. Same post, under the same post, multiple times. Tip of the Spear bundle. This one's a Tip of the Spear tactical blade from Jones store. Or your pills and stuff. Get your, what does it? Keep Alex Jones on the air while getting awesome products. Well, somebody speaks up and says, what the hell is wrong with you? No January 6th arrests, no Epstein, no COVID arrests, right? Or how about the supposed FBI agent that stopped the release of the Epstein files or shorted you on the JFK files? You keep telling us all these claims. Why wouldn't they be arrested if that's what happened? Because they probably didn't happen, guys. COVID is still on the schedule. It is. They're still giving COVID shots, guys, under the current administration. And now the crap CDC nominee. Yep, we just talked about that. I says, fine, arrest the vandals, right? Arrest the people doing the crime, the vandalizing cars or bombing them, put them in jail. But something done. Get something done. It says Bondi is worse than Sessions and Barr combined. These are conservatives, guys. Look for yourself. I'm not just making these things up. You can look. If you're reading this along, it's my interpretation. There could be more than one. I could be wrong about the bigger picture, but it's obvious that a huge portion of conservatives are just not buying it. People that follow him and like half of what he does, they're going, but that's dumb. You're wrong. It's obvious that most people aren't stupid, aren't that easy to play, but enough are. And that's where they make it all. To finish, in general, this is Benny Johnson, of course, sharing Pam Bondi scorches Jasmine Crockett for the threats towards Elon Musk. God, it's like, by the way, right now you're going to see this ridiculous story. It wasn't even worth the time to play, but where this same person walks by some Loomer reporter in Congress and puts her hand on the camera. Like the most, it's like that woman that pretends she was stabbed in the eye with a flag when all the days the flag brushed by her face, also a Zionist. It's typical, right? Well, guess what? Laura Loomer's claiming that my guy was attacked and we're suing you for assault. I mean, look it up for yourself, guys. The video itself makes it very obvious. She put her hand on the camera, walked by. This is what they are. Not only do they constantly try to make themselves the story because I think they're just needing attention. It is dishonest. It is about trying to gain. You're distracting. It's not news. It's propaganda. Now, in this case, and let's be clear, like I said last time, I think they put people like this Crockett out there to make this look ridiculous. Instead of actually, like when it was in the case about whether it's like talking about this and violating constitutional rights. And instead of that, you focus on the airplane back and forth. You take the partisan point and you make that the story. I think they're all doing that. So you put somebody like this Crockett out who seems ridiculous to me and seems to be making it all partisan points. So that's the case you look at. Either way, notice what they're doing here. Threats towards Musk? Well, you can listen for yourself. The point is she's saying that it's like saying that Donald Trump speaking before January 6th, which is the point they make in this, and then people went out and did things, makes it Donald Trump's fault. Well, if you're going to have logical consistency here, didn't we all argue that, well, he said things, that's their responsibility for action? Same kind of way. He didn't say, go do violence. Neither did she. It says words have consequences, Bondi says. And what happened after she said that about Elon Musk in her own home state? 3 explosive devices were found. Well, even that, I mean, I'm very suspicious about how all this keeps happening right now. The whole swatting and Elon targeting, and a lot of it seems to be very hollow, in fact. But either way, are you to pretend now that because she said something about Elon Musk doing things he shouldn't be, that suddenly bombs planted are her fault? I don't care if she went up and said, Elon Musk is a terrorist. Well, isn't that what they're doing, by the way, against everybody they don't like? The point would be that people are responsible for their actions. This is using people, like I said, somebody who's a cartoon, on the left and the right, by the way, because you hate her. They know they've trained you to hate these people. So when they make the case that is, not really following your constitutional law, you ignore it. Or in this case, the point would be that making words violence. You're the left now. You are the left. You're the Democrats. The idea is that people can say things and that's their right. Whether it's bombastic or not, I will always stand by that. Even fire in a theater, I will hold that line. I believe that. I think it's always people's responsibility for their own actions. How that's even something we have to argue is crazy. But what they're doing is now saying words have consequences. Well, guess what, guys? Words literally don't have consequences. Or if we believe the Constitution, they shouldn't. But they're telling you they do now. And because you said the wrong thing, people did bad things. Therefore, you are responsible. How do you not see how that comes back to you? It's just so lazy to me how obvious this stuff is today. And finally, House Speaker Johnson says, we do have authority over federal courts. Yeah, we've lost the plot today, guys. This has been, it's clear that they're building this case in order to rationalize the complete destruction. I mean, look, Republicans primarily have been saying for a really long time, they're coming for our guns. They want to remove our free speech rights. And a lot of us have been like, yes, I've been watching the incremental change, and it's not just Republicans, or rather just Democrats. And now we're at a point where it's the most obvious example I've ever seen of these things coming to fruition, and the people who should be calling them out are pulling their punches in some context. And that's terrifying. I mean, we have to see how rapidly this is happening. Now is the moment, guys. All this time we've been waiting for these actions. Now it's rolling out in front of you. I mean, we shouldn't be waiting for an American to be thrown in El Salvador for this to actually mean something. It's already there. If you believe in these things, if you're fighting for inherent constitutional rights, the moment was weeks ago, months ago, years ago, if you're paying attention. Stand up and find the courage to fight for what you believe in. Not what they tell you believe in, but what you know you believe in. Thank you for tuning in tonight, guys. I appreciate your support. It's kind of a pinnacle moment right now. There's something happening now, and it's not just about Israel. It's not even just about, it's not about one thing or the other. You can feel, I think, if you're just truly standing back and looking from a nonpartisan lens, that there's something different happening right now. It's not just the rhetoric. It's kind of the elevation of the pitch. It's gotten to a point to where it feels more real than ever. I mean, it's kind of abstract, but I know we all sense something like that right now. And if we just kind of let it flow, which is kind of what I think they expect, I believe we're going to wake up at a point where we can't come back from. And I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I certainly hope I'm wrong, but I think we all recognize that there's a bunch. I mean, they're kind of telling you that, whether it's the, efficiency changes for X, Y, and Z or AI to meet this goal. We're watching some pretty rapid changes happening right now. And I think that it's almost like they expect people to just let them see it out. I mean, let's end on that point. What do we keep hearing from the partisan side? Let's just give them a shot. Let's see how it pans out. Let's give them a couple years to see what they get done. Well, maybe that's exactly the point. Hopefully they'll just pacify us until too late. At the very least, I hope you can ask that question. Thank you for tuning in, guys. I appreciate you all. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.